Out front next, polls about to close in the state of Michigan, a crucial test in the key battleground state for both Trump and Biden. John King is out front at the Magic Wall. Plus, Team Trump star witness fails to deliver today, now saying he can't recall when Georgia DA Fani Willis began her relationship with her top prosecutor in the Trump case. Did he just help Willis stay on that Trump case? And a top Olympic fencer from Russia speaking out after defecting from his country, slamming Putin for the war in Ukraine. He'll be my guest tonight. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, a mystery in Michigan tonight. Polls are just about to close in the crucial swing state, one of just a handful of states that will determine the outcome of the 2024 election. And when it comes to the Republican primary tonight, there's little polling to show where voters stand. When it comes to Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, neither one has spent much time in the state. And Nikki Haley only hit the ground on Sunday after South Carolina. Her campaign only started running television ads in the state last week. And as for Trump, he's not even there tonight. He's actually planning just to call in to a GOP victory party. And on the Democratic side, Biden tonight facing an unprecedented uproar over his support for Israel. Biden, the target of a massive campaign urging Democratic Arab Americans and Muslims to cast protest votes against the president tonight. Images like the ones we're about to show you have caused outrage and pain in those communities. People struggling to survive in one of Gaza's only functioning hospitals. A hospital staff calls a, quote, death zone now. People digging with their bare hands in neighborhood after neighborhood, looking for dead children after airstrikes. Well, organizers of tonight's protest vote in Michigan are hoping it sends a message to Biden that he must change course. And the reality is that Michigan is a must-win in November. Biden won the state by just over 150,000 votes in 2020, and Arab Americans were a big part of that. They turned out overwhelmingly for him. In fact, he won by nearly 70% in Michigan's most heavily Arab American communities. And that community is expected to play an even more significant role in 2024. They now make up the majority of residents in the entire city of Dearborn, which is one of the largest cities in the entire state of Michigan. The state's total Middle Eastern population is now over 300,000, twice the margin of victory last time. And in a moment, I'm going to speak to John King about what he is watching tonight in this crucial primary in terms of what it will reveal for both Democrats and Republicans. I want to go first to the ground to Omar Jimenez, who is out front live at a polling station in Waterford, Michigan. And Omar, I know you've been there. You've been talking to people coming in, casting their vote all day. What are they telling you?
Yeah, we've heard a wide range of opinions from a wide range of people. In short, Trump supporters, many of them, have said that immigration and the economy are tops of minds for them, while Biden supporters have said the economy and human decency in the White House has been top of mind for them. Then we've heard a few more nuanced opinions. We spoke to one person who actually voted for Marianne Williamson, who announced she was suspending her campaign earlier this month. But really, this was someone who said he previously voted for Joe Biden in 2020, but because of his handling of the Israel-Hamas war, he couldn't bring himself to vote for him again. Now, of course, that message has been the central theme of what we have seen be a major push in this state, led by Arab American activists, and as we know, to vote uncommitted over his handling of what has happened with Israel and Gaza and Hamas. Now, as you mentioned before coming to me, this state here in Michigan has the largest Arab American population of any state in the entire country. No doubt a crucial voting bloc when we get to the general election. But I want you to take a listen to one Biden supporter we spoke to. Even though this has been billed as not an anti-Biden vote, it has been billed as a protest vote, this voter, this Biden voter, didn't necessarily agree with voting uncommitted because he saw the alternative to Joe Biden as much worse. Take a listen.
A lot of people that are opposing him over this uncommitted, they're forgetting about the Muslim ban. When the women were at the airport wanting to visit their families and they were banned from the country. They've totally forgotten about that. And if he gets back in there and he doesn't have to worry about any voters, imagine what he's going to do to them.
And he's, of course, talking about that 2017 temporary travel ban that Trump instituted on 7 majority Muslim countries. But obviously, it is a dynamic not just to watch here in the primary, but of course, it indicates where support may or may not be heading into the general election. Another dynamic we've watched for today is, look, you may notice it's not exactly packed behind me right now, but that doesn't mean people haven't been voting. We saw over 1 million people vote either early or absentee prior to getting here today, and that, of course, has been a major victory for a lot of voting organizers here.
All right, Omar, thank you very much. And I want to go now to John King at the Magic Wall. So, John, the results obviously may not be the big story tonight in terms of who the winner is, but what is beneath that certainly will say a lot. What are you looking for on the Republican side of things?
We slide this out of the way, Aaron, and we'll get to it. Number one, if you look at the map right now, it's Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, right? He's 4-0 in the states, 5-0 if you add in the Virgin Islands. So if you're Nikki Haley, who could be gone from the race a week from tonight after Super Tuesday, you are looking for some proof that Republican voters are listening to you when you say, hey, wake up, we have to stop this. And so will it come in Michigan tonight? Number one, 55 delegates at stake. Number two, be careful about that. Most of the delegates, a state convention decides where the delegates go. It will be influenced for at least 16 of those delegates by the primary results tonight, but it's not necessarily beholden to the primary results tonight, and Trump has the state party pretty wired. But what do you look for? So let's go back to 2016 in the Republican primary. Let's cut 2016, not 2012. There we go. 2012 was interesting, too, though. Trump won Michigan. Where do you see the Ted Cruz? You see some Ted Cruz and John Kasich in the suburban areas. That's what you look for tonight. Look, Aaron, the math has been pretty clear for Nikki Haley for some time. She says she needs to stay in to try to rattle the party to rally around her. Michigan gives her an opportunity. We'll be looking in the suburbs. I wouldn't run to Vegas and place a bet on that. But as you watch the vote come in tonight, is there any evidence in Michigan tonight that after these 4 contests, Republican voters are saying, you know, she's right, we need to give her a boost? If she doesn't get it in Michigan tonight, as I said, next Tuesday night could be the last hurrah.
So that's the Republican side. Now, on the Democratic side, right, as Omar was just laying out, you've got more Arab Americans in Michigan than any other state. This so-called protest vote, as that is being billed, could be very significant for Biden, right? And it's called technically, I know, uncommitted in terms of the box you check in Michigan. What are you watching there?
How big is the uncommitted vote? And then how do we understand? There's a history of voting uncommitted in the Democratic primary in Michigan, so let's not overstate this. At the same time, you mentioned at the top of the show, Joe Biden won by 154,000 votes last time. That's why I have the 2020 map up here, right? 300,000 people of Middle Eastern descent, 200,000 or so of them Muslims in Michigan. Many of them live in Dearborn, a Detroit suburb out here. But it's not just the Arab Americans, Aaron. We were in Michigan several weeks ago. Arab Americans say, Mr. President, we are going to vote against you. They're threatening to vote against him not only in this primary, but in November as well if the policy doesn't change. And guess what? The Israeli-Gaza conflict has also caused the president a giant problem with younger voters. Listen.
You know, Mr. President, I've seen you take key humanitarian steps, but I think the next step is a ceasefire. And I think that would go a long way with voters.
Muslims all across this country voted for Biden because we were, and not in a million years would I like to vote for Trump. But coming around this year, I don't know if I'm voting at all, but I definitely will not be voting for Biden.
I was just going to say, you feel this way.
To an extent, yes.
Now, well, tell me why.
Well, I don't know if the camera saw that, but it says abandon Biden. I feel as though President Biden doesn't value my life as a Muslim American as much as he values other lives. And I think that's why I feel that way.
And so Aaron Ibrahim told our team today he did vote in the primary, and he voted uncommitted. He is not completely foreclosing voting for the president in November, but he said he would need to see a giant policy shift. And so that's the issue when it comes to the math. Of the battleground states, this was actually a pretty good one for Joe Biden, 154,000 votes. But come November, he needs to be worrying about Nikki Haley supporters in the suburbs, trying to win them over. He needs to be competing with Donald Trump for the auto workers in Detroit and the suburbs around Detroit. He does not, if he is competing for Muslim American, Arab American votes come October, young voters come October, then he's in trouble.
Right. That's focusing on a place you shouldn't have to focus, I guess, is how they would see it in the Democratic Party. So what does tonight tell us about that, about how November shapes up?
I would be careful about tonight because it is a primary where we know Trump is well ahead and Biden is well ahead. So it's hard to project all the way to November, except for on that question of Democratic enthusiasm, I think is very important. Because one of the issues you look at is where we are now, right? What do we know coming into tonight? That this is a very different race than 2020, that the president is in trouble in many of those states that were key to his victory, including the state of Michigan. A poll just this month by Fox, Trump 42, Biden 37. Noteworthy, both candidates are so low. A lot of people don't like either of this. They just don't like this choice. But in the battleground states, Michigan, he's losing. Georgia, he's losing. Pennsylvania, it's tied. Wisconsin, it's tied. So if you look at the math, Michigan has a Democratic governor. Biden won it pretty comfortably, actually, by battleground state standards 4 years ago. If he is struggling here, it signals he's got very broad troubles.
All right, John King, thank you very much. As we await those results, I want to go now to the highest-ranking Muslim lawmaker in Michigan, the Democratic State House Majority Leader, Abraham Ayash. He is the first Arab American to be a majority leader in a state legislature. And I very much appreciate your time, Leader. So I know you're urging Democrats to vote uncommitted. That's the box. You just heard a voter there telling John King he had checked, right? That's the box to check for, to protest Biden in this case. Now, there are always uncommitted votes in the primaries in Michigan. As John pointed out, it's been about 20,000 votes in each of the past 3 Democratic cycles. So with that context, what are you hoping to accomplish tonight?
Look, President Biden has been one of the most consequential presidents in modern American history as it relates to the domestic policy. But what we've seen over the last 4 months is nothing less than an abject moral failure in terms of dignifying the humanity of the Palestinians. And what we're seeing in Michigan is a groundswell of support of people that are anti-war and people that want this country to lead with moral clarity and want our president to not support an administration in Israel that has killed nearly 30,000 innocent men, women, and children. So tonight's results will be a reflection of that frustration, and folks are going to come out and demand better for our government and for our democracy through the best way possible, which is our vote.
So have you heard today from the president or anyone on his team about your efforts to vote against him in the primary tonight?
No, and I want to be clear, this is not a vote against the president, but this is a vote for reaffirming that the United States should stand on the principles of human rights, on dignifying Palestinians, and that we are not going to be a country that greenlights the the killing of innocent men, women, and children that we've seen the Netanyahu regime has done over the last 4 months, and it's unacceptable.
Does a ceasefire, while it would be crucial, is that something that does it for you, or is that in a sense checking the box? I mean, Gaza's still leveled. People there's been an incredible amount of death and destruction, and does a ceasefire do it for you?
Well, when we met with the White House a couple weeks ago, our demands were very clear. We need to see a permanent ceasefire. We want to see the flow of humanitarian aid and the reconstruction of Gaza. And finally, setting conditions and restrictions on the aid to Israel. It does not make sense that we speak about human rights and the way we talk about the Ukrainian people and their right to self-determination and their right to safety and security, yet in the same vein, we are funding an Israeli government that does not seem to have any regard for the humanity of the Palestinians. And I think this message is a way to emphasize that we do not want to see this hypocrisy from our leadership, but rather we want to see that moral clarity in the foreign policy that we unfortunately have not seen yet.
So if you don't see all of those things, or you're not comfortable with this as time goes on in November, at this point, obviously it seems that your choices are going to be Biden or Trump for the Democrats and the Republicans. Obviously, you could go another route, but that'll be the Democratic and Republican choice as it looks right now. And obviously, Abraham, you're aware of this, but I want to remind everybody watching about some of the things Trump has said about the Muslim community.
Unfortunately, at this moment in time, there is a Muslim problem in the world.
There were people that were cheering in the other side of New Jersey where you have large Arab populations. They were cheering as the World Trade Center came down.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
I think Islam hates us.
When I return to office, the travel ban is coming back even bigger than before and much stronger than before.
Obviously, that was over a 10-year period, but that last comment was last summer, right? That the Muslim ban is going to come back even bigger than before if he wins again. Those are just a small sampling of the things that you're well aware that Trump has said over the years. If this ends up in a situation where Muslims in Michigan do not show up for Biden, right? Even if they don't vote for Trump, they stay home, right? Something happens either way. That means that Biden could lose the state. He could lose the election. Are you okay with that outcome, Abraham?
There is no doubt that Donald Trump is a threat to the American Republic, is a threat to the idea of democracy, and no one is arguing against that. But I think the question that we have to ask ourselves, and to ask President Biden, is the voters have done everything they've been told they're supposed to do. They go out, they protest, they lobby their elected officials, they ask for our government to do better. That is inherently democratic. And when we see our leaders not act and react and heed the call of the public, the question then becomes, what is President Biden willing to do to protect and save democracy from Donald Trump? It is not the question that we should be asking the voters. When I run for office, Aaron, I don't get mad at people when I lose my election or when people don't resonate with my message. I go back and ask myself, what could I have done better to campaign, and what platform and what vision did I not present that should have inspired people? So the question that we need to be asking is that to President Biden, and he still has time to change course. You know, tonight's vote is a way to demonstrate for the president that he can change course and continue to save lives. The vote for uncommitted is a vote to save the innocent men, women, and children that are still alive, that Netanyahu is hell-bent on killing. So, and I want to close with this, Aaron. My uncle was killed 3 days before Trump signed the travel ban. He was in Yemen, was killed in an airstrike, and we had applied to bring him into the United States 10 years prior to that point. So I know the deep pain and the deep impact that Donald Trump's policies have inflicted on our communities. But the question has to be to Joe Biden. What is he willing to do to save democracy? Our position has been very clear.
All right, Abraham, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. As the votes, of course, continue and polls are getting ready to close. Next, a star witness for Trump's legal team. Today on the witness stand, and it was a flop. Did he actually help save Fani Willis? Plus, our Fred Pleiken reporting from the streets of Iran, where they are still chanting death to America, as citizens are about to vote in an election there that could send a big message to the U.S. And a lot of people are not happy with Wendy's plan to make you pay more during lunch rush. But is Wendy's actually just really late to the party when it comes to surge pricing? Tonight, Team Trump's star witness flops. The one person that Trump allies wanted to get on the witness stand, the person that they thought would prove that the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis's affair with her top prosecutor, Nathan Wade, in the Trump case began before she hired him for the Trump case, didn't deliver today. Wade's divorce attorney wavering again and again on when the affair began. This has been part of efforts by Trump and his co-defendants to get Fani Willis disqualified from the case. They have claimed that she misused public funds while carrying out a relationship with Wade. Now, those claims are threatening to delay or altogether end Willis's prosecution of Trump. Nick Valencia begins our coverage tonight out front.
Why in the heck would you speculate in this text message?
Tonight, Terrence Bradley back on the stand after the judge determined he couldn't invoke attorney-client privilege.
He claimed at the time was privilege. I found that it's not.
Bradley, Nathan Wade's former law partner, was billed by the defense as the star witness who would provide proof that Wade and the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis lied about when the romantic relationship started. Bradley testifying he was just speculating in text messages to a defense attorney where he said the two absolutely were dating before he was hired.
Did you lie to Miss Merchant when you told her facts about Mr. Wade and Miss Willis's relationship?
Not that I recall. I don't recall ever whether any of it was a lie or not.
The defense trying to determine if Willis hired Wade to lead the Georgia election subversion case when they were already together or after, as both Willis and Wade have testified.
What did Nathan Wade tell you about the relationship?
I recall him stating that at some point they were dating. I can't tell you what date that was. It was made in confidence.
Willis herself was pressed about the timing at an earlier hearing.
When did you start dating?
It was right around then.
April 2022?
22, yes.
2022.
It was around then. I don't know, like, you know, it's not like when you're in grade school and you send a little letter and it says, will you be my girlfriend, and you check it.
But after today's emergency hearing, there didn't appear to be any smoking gun evidence. Instead, Bradley facing questions about his own credibility.
Did you have any reason to lie?
I don't know if speculation is lying.
The 2-hour hearing ending without the damaging testimony defense attorneys had hoped for in their bid to get Willis disqualified and the case against Donald Trump and his allies tossed.
Why would you speculate when she was asking you a direct question about when the relationship started? And you don't want to testify to that in court. That's the best explanation.
No, I have no direct knowledge of when the relationship started.
There's another hearing scheduled for Friday where defense attorneys are expected to introduce cell phone data, which they received from a subpoena, and they say shows that there was thousands of phone interactions between Nathan Wade and Fani Willis before they said they started dating. The efforts to disqualify Fani Willis and get her removed from this case pick back up Friday at 1 p.m. Aaron?
All right, Nick, thank you very much. In Atlanta tonight, I want to go now to Ryan Goodman, our out front legal analyst. And Ryan, you watched Terrence Bradley's testimony today. You were really watching it, I know, throughout the afternoon. So what do you think? Do you think it'll help Fani Willis?
I certainly think it does not hurt Fani Willis. He didn't say anything to contradict Fani Willis's or Nathan Wade's testimony. So in that respect, I assume that they have breathed a sigh of relief in a certain sense. I do think he was, in some sense, not such a great witness that in some ways he may have heard her to some degree, because the judge could actually think this person is keeping the information from the court, and the reason for him to do that is because it is damaging to Willis and Wade. But that's not very strong. That is not a big win for the defense at all. It was, as you described it, very much of a dud for them and very much of a windfall for Wade and Willis.
So how does this then play into the other question the judge has, which is whether to decide to admit the cell phone data as evidence? And that's a private investigator who was hired by Team Trump, said that he found Wade's phone a minimum of 35 times connected to an extended period to cell phone towers near Willis's condo, that there were 2,000 voice calls and about 12,000 text messages between Willis and Wade in 2021. That's significant because obviously that's before Willis hired Wade, and it's before when the two have testified under oath that their relationship began, which they said was after he was hired. So that data could be very crucial. Does anything in what we saw today give you a sense of where the judge will go as to whether admitting that evidence happens?
I think their high likelihood is that the judge will admit the evidence and then give it the kind of scrutiny that one might think it deserves and give the prosecutors the opportunity to try to rebut it. Today, the judge, time and again, gave the defense counsel license to ask certain questions, license to even ask questions that had already been asked. Each time he was giving them an opportunity to try to make their case. So I think the judge might think, look, the cell phone data information looks like it could be very important. It could decide the outcome.
And do you think that if it could disqualify her if he deems it real?
It's the strange quality of life in a certain sense. I think if it does come in and he deems it real, it won't necessarily disqualify her because it shows a conflict of interest, but it could just very easily disqualify her because it would then show that she and Nathan Wade lied to the court. It would directly contradict their testimony. I think that's the problem for them.
All right, Ryan, thank you very much. And next, an Olympic fencer from Russia gave it all up, defecting to the United States. Tonight, taking on the Russian president head-on, he's out front. Plus, our Fred Pleiken with a rare look inside Iran, where voters are anxious to send a warning to the United States that they are ready to take it on. Tonight, warning shot from the Kremlin. Putin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov telling Western nations not to send troops to Ukraine unless they want all-out war with Russia. This after the French president, Emmanuel Macron, said the possibility, quote, cannot be ruled out. The tension coming as a former Russian Olympic fencer who defected from his country over Putin's invasion is bravely speaking out tonight here out front. Konstantin Lokhanov left Russia the night before the war broke out. Didn't know about the war, obviously. It happened that night. He never went back, outraged by what Russia was doing to its neighboring country. That decision cost him his marriage. It cost him his country. It's not safe for him to return to visit. He now is living in the United States, trying to obtain citizenship to compete for a chance to represent America in the 2024 Summer Olympics. Out front now, Konstantin Lokhanov. And Konstantin, I am so glad to have the opportunity to speak with you. You know, as you and I are talking tonight, a human rights activist in Russia was jailed. The Russian-American ballerina is in jail now on a treason charge. Alexei Navalny, Putin's top foe, of course, is dead. And yet, Konstantin, you are speaking to me tonight. How much risk are you taking on by continuing to speak out for what you believe in?
First of all, thanks for the invitation. And I hope I'm not that big enemy as Alexei Navalny, but I think I just need to be careful, but I don't see the point to being scared, because it's exactly what they want us to. They want us to be scared and just don't share our opinion. And I just don't want to let them what they want to, and I want to just share my thoughts as it is.
And so you speak out, and you continue to speak out, Konstantin. When you left, you happened to be out of the country the day before the war started, and you didn't go back because you chose to not go. You chose this path. It has come, though, at great personal cost to you. Your wife wouldn't leave Russia. I know you had to get divorced. You've lost your wife. You've lost your country. What has this been like for you?
It was a hard time, but I wouldn't say it was hard to make that decision, because it took me 1 day to decide that I don't want to go back anymore, just because I don't want to be a part of that. The thing that I left there is more about just the cost to being free and being open to talk, being open to live the life that I want to. And here's my choice. So I decided that I can pay that cost. For me, the life valuables are more important.
Konstantin, you know, you say it took you just 1 day to make the decision, that it was easy in that sense. But obviously there are so many for whom it was not easy, right? Even many who stay, who are still torn or don't know. But you were able to make a choice so quickly. What was it that made it so easy for you?
I think because my athlete career, I traveled a lot and I saw the world. I pretty much knew how the people's living in different countries, and also my cultural sense, my life valuables, they are more American than Russian. And I think that's one of the main differences is that I was pro-American, pro-European as my mindset even before the war started.
And, you know, Konstantin, the last Olympics, as we're getting ready for the Olympics this summer, we're in Beijing, and it was literally in the days before the war began, and everybody was watching Putin. It's been it's been 2 years now since that moment. How much further do you think Putin is willing to go, Konstantin?
I have no idea, unfortunately. We're always thinking that he cannot go further, but we saw what happened 9 days from now. They murdered Navalny. Everyone's thinking it's the next level, it's impossible. But here we are.
And Konstantin, you are an Olympic level fencer. I know you're trying to get U.S. citizenship in time to have a chance to compete for a spot on the U.S. Olympic fencing team this summer. Given everything that you've been through, what would it mean to you to have the opportunity to compete in the Olympics for the U.S.?
It would be honor for me, because I already said that my life mindset is very American, and I'm feeling home when I'm in America, and it would be honor for me to, in the best way, to stay on a podium and with an American flag around me. I just dream that it might happen.
Well, Konstantin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me tonight. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, also tonight, the U.S. is ramping up pressure on Iran to stop providing weapons, including long-range missiles, to Putin, announcing fresh sanctions against Iran. It comes as tension between the U.S. and Iran is rising, as Iranians are now preparing to vote in a high-stakes election. Our Fred Pleiken is in Tehran with a story that you will see first out front.
Iranian conservatives with a show of force ahead of what many say will be a key election on Friday, supporting their leadership's tough stance against both the U.S. and Israel. His sons Ihsan and Hossein dressed up in military fatigues, voter Mohammad Kalantari says he wants to show the U.S. Iran's strength. They know that Iran is a powder keg, he says. It only takes a spark to blow up the entire region. Iranian youth, me and the children, are wearing these clothes to say that we are the soldiers of this country. And this man says, through this election, we will prove that we can stand against the U.S. not only economically, but militarily. They are sanctioning us, but this will be solved soon, and then we will be a country sanctioning them. Tension between the U.S. and Iran has reached a boiling point as Washington accuses Tehran of supporting Houthis in Yemen firing missiles at cargo ships, as well as pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria targeting U.S. bases there, including the January 28th attack killing 3 U.S. service members and wounding dozens. Iran denies any involvement, but has ripped into the U.S. for Washington's support of Israel and its campaign against Hamas in Gaza. At the conservative event, disdain for Israel on full display. Flags with the Star of David on the floor for people to step on.
It certainly seems pretty clear how most of the people at this rally are going to vote in the upcoming parliamentary elections, but this event is really about something else. It's about getting out the vote. In fact, the supreme leader of this country has urged people to head to the ballot boxes to make sure there will be a high turnout.
It's the first election since massive protests erupted in Iran in late 2022 following the death of Mahsa Amini after she was detained for violating hijab laws. On the streets of Tehran, get out the vote posters nearly everywhere. But with many moderate candidates barred from running, inflation high, and the economy reeling from tough U.S.-led sanctions, some say they feel unenthusiastic when we ask if they will vote.
No.
The country belongs to the people, this man says. There should be participation in the elections, but it should be freer with the presence of all groups and minorities. It's unclear if Iran's leaders can persuade more people to vote in an election deemed pivotal for the country's future.
And Aaron, the leadership here is certainly trying to put on a full-court press to get people to go to the polls and vote. We were speaking a little bit about the candidates that were not allowed to run in this election. Well, some 15,000 are actually competing for the 290 seats in Parliament. And again, the Supreme Leader himself also coming out and urging people to go to the polls. Aaron?
All right, Fred, thank you very much in Tehran tonight. And out front next, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign has secured enough votes to qualify for the ballot in Arizona and Georgia. This could be crucial. Could it make him a serious spoiler in November? And Wendy's, joining the likes of Uber and airlines, which all use surge pricing, is paying more during peak times, the new normal. We are just moments away from many of the polls closing in Michigan for tonight's crucial primaries. This is a pro-Robert F. Kennedy Jr. super PAC just announced that it has enough signatures for him to qualify for the ballot in both Arizona and Georgia. Now, Biden won Arizona by just over 10,000 votes and Georgia, of course, by 11,779 votes. A third-party candidate could upend the entire election because Arizona and Georgia are 2 of the 6 closely watched swing states that could determine the outcome in November. Up front now, Van Jones, the former special advisor to President Obama and longtime Republican pollster Ed Goes. And thanks so much to both of you. I appreciate your time. Van, 10,000 votes in either of those states could turn the entire election. The New York Times Siena college poll from the fall in Arizona has Kennedy with 26% support, Biden and Trump a little bit ahead, but not much, 33% each. Just to make the point, RFK Jr. could do a lot better than 10,000 votes in those 2 states.
He can, and it is, if you understand basic math, this is a shockwave through the Democratic Party because it takes a lot less than the amount of support he's got, especially among young people, to throw this whole thing to Biden. And we can lose some states, but we can't lose many. And so we're going to have a tough enough time in Georgia. We're going to have a tough enough time in Arizona anyway. But this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. And I think for me, my heart breaks. I know RFK Jr. In fact, he endorsed and wrote the foreword for my first book, very close to his sister, Carrie. He was an environmental champion hero of mine for a very long time. But if you don't have a pathway to win the White House, and I don't think that he's going to be on enough ballots to win the White House, then you shouldn't be doing this because you can only hurt Joe Biden and hand the country over to Donald Trump.
So, Ed, from all the data you see and the voters you're speaking to, who does RFK Jr. hurt the most in these? Let's stick with Arizona and Georgia right now. Biden or Trump?
Well, clearly, it comes from Biden, but it is offset a little bit by the fact that there are many Republicans that are planning on staying at home and not voting for Trump. So the math is a little bit different than what you would traditionally look at. Biden needs all those Democrats to turn out, but at this point, it looks like Biden will get more of the Democrats to turn out, even with a third-party race, than Trump will in terms of the Republicans.
So, which is crucial context here. And of course, RFK Jr. says he wants to get on the ballot in all 50 states, Van. We'll see about that. I know you're skeptical. But Michigan is one that RFK Jr. is looking to get on the ballot next. That's where they're focusing. And Michigan, of course, has those primaries tonight. What are you looking at to gauge Biden's strength there? And obviously that was, as John King said, as far as a swing state goes, very comfortable victory for Biden last time around. But David Axelrod was saying last night, it appears it will be much closer this time.
Sure. I mean, Michigan's going to be tougher because you got a bunch of constituencies that we need that right now are grumpy, to say the least. The big Muslim community there in Michigan, they are not happy with the way that Joe Biden has been handling the situation in Gaza. And you also have a lot of young people of color, especially African Americans and some African American men, that are just frustrated in general with the state of things. And so you've got a very short period of time to get those two groups back on board. Don't forget, Donald Trump has won in Michigan before. He won in Michigan in 2016. He lost Michigan in 2020. 2024, it is possible that he could win again. So, my thing with RFK is, again, he's going to the places that are the swing states that are going to be the margins of victory for either candidate. And that is, but his math right now, he is not on track to be in enough states to actually win the presidency. He's just on track to be in enough states to cost Joe Biden the presidency.
So, Ed, I want to play part of Seth Meyers last night. He did an interview with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was trying to take on the central issue that is facing him in poll after poll, age, and tried to turn it against Donald Trump. Here's what he did.
Number one, you got to take a look at the other guy. He's about as old as I am, but he can't remember his wife's name.
Yeah.
And number one. Number two, it's about how old your ideas are. Look, I mean, this is a guy who wants to take us back. He wants to take us back on Roe v. Wade. He wants to take us back on a whole range of issues that are 50, 60 years, they've been solid American positions.
And he's referring to Trump referring to his wife as Mercedes, it appears, as opposed to Melania. I guess that was the first reference. Does this strategy work? Going on a late night show and taking the age issue head on in a joking way, but then trying to do it seriously. Does that work?
Well, it certainly works if you get a lot of people laughing at it and laughing at the other candidate. It also, I think, showed him to be a little bit more on his toes than some people think he is. And I think that is very, very helpful in the process. But, you know, his weakness in this campaign, if there's any argument that will carry the most weight with the centrist voters out there, it's a question of, will he last the next 4 years, and do you really want her to be the next president? That's going to be the thing used against him on age, not just his age, and probably the more direct. So the more he can kind of show some real spunkiness, I think it is good. I have always felt he is not as bad as what is portrayed out there in terms of his age. He may walk like an old man. I don't know that he thinks like an old man. And I think he has an opportunity to prove that in the next election.
All right. Well, both of you, thank you so very much. And Ed, I want everyone to know you're also the author of Question of Respect, Bringing Us Together in a Deeply Divided Nation, something we all hope we'll see more of. Thanks to both of you. And next, Wendy's wants to charge you more for a burger at lunchtime. So is that about to be the new normal? Where's the beef?
Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef?
Well, that's the way it is now. A lot of bun, little beef. That beef may cost you a lot more, too. It's because Wendy's will soon start testing digital menus that change prices by the minute based on the demand. Now, they call it dynamic pricing, better known as surge pricing. And Harry Enton is here to go beyond the numbers. So, Harry, obviously this is driven by inflation. And everybody knows inflation's been a very serious issue. But how big of an issue is it for chains like Wendy's and McDonald's that are trying it?
Yeah, I mean, look, my mom always said to me when I was growing up, do not go into the service industry. Do not go into the restaurant business. And if you look at inflation right now, look, inflation's been bad over the past few years, right, since the COVID pandemic. But it's been up 20% overall. Look at it for out-of-home dining, like restaurants. It's up 26%. That's how much the prices are up. Even over the last year, it's up 5%, nearly double the overall inflation rate. Why is that? Well, we know that, fast food restaurants employ a lot of low-wage workers, right? Those wages have been rising, especially as this job market's been so good. They don't have to stay in one place. They can go to a lot of other places. How about the fact that commercial rents are still really, really high for a lot of folks? So restaurants are having to pass on the cost to the consumer, and the result of that is higher fast food prices.
All right. And the thing is, though, when you think about it, actually, surge pricing is not new, right? Uber in the rain. Or
like tonight.
Uber, right, pouring rain in Manhattan. We're starting to see it more and more. So it actually would seem maybe Wendy's is just really late. They're getting all the outrage, but...
Yeah, I mean, sure. How about airline tickets? We see, surge pricing, dynamic pricing. You see it on Amazon. Concert tickets, right? You go on and Ticketmaster's doing all this stuff. And now it's coming...
Wait, I didn't know Amazon did it.
Yeah, Amazon does it, absolutely. I've seen my cream soda go up and down when I try and buy it on there. And
oh, really?
Yes.
Must be when I come in to buy it.
That's exactly right. The two people who buy A&W cream soda.
And Tab.
Very good. Although Tab out of business. R.I.P. But, fast food as well. But here's the real question, Aaron. The real question is the demand going to be so high and are there going to be so few options that this dynamic or surge pricing will actually work for something like Wendy's when I could just go across the street and maybe get a burger at a diner?
You could, but McDonald's is doing surge pricing too, right?
Yeah, they have certainly tried it a little bit. Now, we'll see if these are ultimately successful, but I think what this says is something about the fast food industry at large, right? I'm used to going through a drive-thru, right, with my mom, maybe when I was a kid, to Burger King or McDonald's. Yeah. Perhaps you might go up and you may order in person, but what we see is more and more of McDonald's sales are digital. Look at the rise in the digital sales as a percentage of overall sales. It was just 20% 2021. Now it's upwards of 40%. My goodness gracious.
That is incredible. Wow. No more fish fillet in the drive-thru.
No
It was
more.
my Wednesday afternoon on early pickup. All right, Harry, thanks so much, and thanks to all of you. Special election coverage starts now.
This is a big night in Michigan as voters in that critical swing state cast ballots in the 2024 presidential race. Most polling places are closing right now in Democratic and Republican primaries that are testing support for the likely nominees of both parties. I'm Anderson Cooper. This is a special edition of AC 360.
And I'm Jake Tapper. We are standing by for the very first results from Michigan now that voting has ended across most of the state. We're going to get our first chance to project winners once the last polling places close less than an hour from now. In the Democratic primary, President Biden might be facing his most serious challenge yet this election. You're not from his long-shot opponent, Congressman Dean Phillips. No, from progressives who are opposed to the president's response to the Israel-Hamas war. This group of progressives, they are pushing for a permanent ceasefire, and they want Biden to cut U.S. military aid to Israel. And they are urging Michigan Democrats to cast a protest vote, to vote for uncommitted in the primary instead of voting for President Biden. The war in Gaza is an issue that hits hard in Michigan, which has one of the largest Arab American populations in the United States. And we're going to be watching to see the size of this uncommitted vote to gauge dissent within the president's party as he heads toward his widely anticipated rematch with Donald Trump. Now, President Biden narrowly beat Trump in Michigan 4 years ago. The state should prove to be decisive once again in November. In the Republican primary, Trump is aiming for yet another big win over his rival, Nikki Haley, just a few days after trouncing her in her home state of South Carolina. Trump is counting on Michigan and its 55 Republican delegates to propel him even closer to clinching the GOP nomination. As we await the first results tonight, our correspondents are standing by. They're covering the candidates. They're at key polling places throughout Michigan. First to Jeff Zeleny, who's covering the Democrats tonight, and he's at an event in Dearborn, Michigan, for supporters of that protest vote for uncommitted. Jeff, what are you hearing from the Biden camp about the test of the president this evening?
Well, Jake, one of the central questions hanging over this entire 2024 campaign is whether the president is able to make this election a stark choice between his candidacy and former President Donald Trump, or if it becomes a referendum on the policies of the Biden administration. And in this Michigan primary tonight, there is going to be a critical test of that, going to give us a few key data points about what voters are thinking about his policies. Of course, his handling of Israel's war in Gaza. We are here in Dearborn, Michigan. Of course, this is the heart of the Arab American and Muslim American community. They have been key supporters of the president. They certainly were in 2020. Not anymore, Jake. We've been here talking to voters. We were a few weeks ago as well when the president was in town. The anger is clear. The disappointment is clear. They want a change. So this is a protest vote, voting uncommitted. But the question is how many people actually turn out to vote uncommitted. Now, that may not be our best guide tonight because there's, of course, is a non-competitive election. President Biden is not facing a challenger per se, just his policies are being challenged. But talking with Democratic officials, of course, one of the president's biggest challenges is keeping his coalition together. Of course, that's Arab American, Muslim American voters, but it's also young voters, progressive voters, black voters, Latino voters. Of course, Michigan was ground zero for that. Joe Biden sort of pulled all of those factions of the Democratic Party together 4 years ago. Now that coalition is fraying. But Jake, I had an instructive conversation with a pastor here in Detroit earlier today. He said the biggest worry for the White House, the biggest worry for the Biden campaign is apathetic voters. He said apathetic voters don't go out and vote uncommitted. They simply stay home. And that, he believes, is the biggest worry for President Biden.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, interesting stuff. CNN's Kristen Holmes is at West Palm Beach, Florida, covering the Trump campaign. And Kristen, what is the former president, Donald Trump, looking for when votes come in from Michigan?
Well, Donald Trump is expected to handily win this primary against Nikki Haley, but instead his team is looking for clues to inform a potential general election rematch with President Joe Biden. As you noted, Jake, Donald Trump won Michigan in 2016 and then lost to Biden in 2020. And in a recent poll in Fox News of Michigan voters, they looked at a hypothetical rematch between the two, and Trump had 47% of support over Biden's 45%. Now, that is well within the margin of error, but gives you an idea of how close this race could potentially be. Now, many of Trump's allies believe that Michigan is the key to the pathway back to the White House. And here's what they're looking for tonight. They are looking at, first, moderate Republican voters. So far in this primary season, they have leaned away from the former president. The other thing that they are looking for is an area that Donald Trump has underperformed in several of these contests, which is suburban voters. This is going to be critical in Michigan in the fall. Now, one of the hopes of these advisors is that with all of these resounding early wins in Nevada, in Iowa, in New Hampshire, that some of those voters, some of those moderates, some of those suburban voters are going to shift towards Donald Trump.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. Diane Gallagher is at a polling place in Ann Arbor, Michigan, home to the University of Michigan Fighting Wolverines. Diane, what's happening where you are?
That's right, Jake, and we have just shut down this polling center right here. I have with me precinct chairperson Jenny Rogers, who is going to read to me the results from her particular precinct, number 437. And Jenny, what does this summary say as it's coming out?
So on the Republican Party ballot, we have 73 votes cast for Nikki Haley, 23 votes for Donald Trump, and 1 uncommitted. And on the Democratic ballot, we've got 195 votes for Joe Biden, 1 vote for Dean Phillips, 4 votes for Marianne Williamson, 66 uncommitted, and 1 write-in. And that's it. A total of 364 votes cast today.
All right, that is precinct 437 here in Ann Arbor. And of course, look, Jake, you mentioned, of course, home to the University of Michigan. This is a blue area in more than one way, though. Look, President Joe Biden beat Donald Trump with about 72% of the vote in 2020. So the expectation was to have a greater number, of course, of those Democratic ballots. But what many here in Michigan had been looking at was that uncommitted number, because that Listen to Michigan program, that campaign had been focusing on Ann Arbor specifically because of the progressive vote and the young vote here. Again, this is just a snapshot of this area, one precinct of many in the Ann Arbor area. Jake.
All right, Diane Gallagher, thanks so much. And it's the turn of the hour, so we have a key race alert for you. Let's bring you some of the numbers as they come in on the Republican side in the Republican primary in Michigan. With 1% of the vote in, Donald Trump is in the lead with 54.4% of the vote. He has 10,950 votes, roughly 3,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 39.8% of the vote. She has 8,011 votes. Obviously, it is very early. We only have 1% of the vote in, but those are actual votes, not polls. And now we have some Democratic numbers to look at. And the Democratic primary in the state of Michigan, with 117 delegates at stake, President Joe Biden, the incumbent, with 4% of the vote in, has 88.3% of the vote. Uncommitted is coming in second. That's at 7.2%. And Dean Phillips, the congressman from Minnesota, is at 2.1%. President Joe Biden has 31,753 votes, and that is roughly 30,000 votes ahead of uncommitted, which is a number we're going to be watching all night. John King, I see you starting there with Haley and Trump, but the truth of the matter is, for both Democrats and Republicans, one of the things we're going to be looking at tonight is the size of the number 2 vote to see how much of a protest that is of the person in the first place.
Yes, as we think we are moving on to the general election, as we see Donald Trump 5-0 in Republican contest, expected to make it 6-0 tonight, then on the Super Tuesday next week, the challenge for both campaigns is start thinking about November. If you're Joe Biden and you're worried about young voters and Muslim voters and Arab American voters and the other people of Middle Eastern descent, 300,000 plus in Michigan alone, if you're worried about the people who voted for you last time, that means you're on your heels. And Joe Biden doesn't need that. So this number tonight will tell us something, how much we'll see by the end of the night, about how weak is President Biden in his own base. Because we know Trump, we've seen it, he's 5-0. He's strong in his. The numbers speak for themselves of the past several weeks we've been here. So the question is, doesn't mean he can't fix it by November, but it's deep. I was out in Michigan several weeks ago, and you see it on the college campuses, Ann Arbor. So if you look, let's just even look at what we have so far. Let's just start with actual votes. Oakland County, this is where Omar was. This is the suburb west of Macomb County. This used to be a reliably Republican suburb, but in recent years, what has happened? College-educated voters, suburban voters have gone Democratic. This has become blue, and Biden here, the question is to watch that, right? Biden needs these votes. There'll be some Nikki Haley votes here in Oakland County, suburban people who don't like Donald Trump. So we'll see that. The Biden needs them. If he's worried about these voters, when he should be targeting Nikki Haley voters to win in November, that's a problem. So that's one place.
You want to go to Omar? He's there right now.
Then you come out. Well, Omar's there right now. We've got, so far, in Oakland County, all the votes we have are from Oakland County. Everything we have comes straight from Oakland County.
Let's pop in with Omar right now, who's at a voting site in Waterford Township, Michigan. Omar, what's happening there? Your polling place just closed. Do you have any numbers for us? Do you have any votes?
Yeah, Waterford Township here in Oakland County just closed a few minutes ago, and they transmitted their numbers up to the county, giving you a preliminary look at District 9, Precinct 9 here in Waterford and Oakland County. 230 total votes came in, 44 of them were for Democrats, 185 for Republicans. On the Democratic side of things, Biden got 29, Dean Phillips 1, uncommitted 13. And then on the Republican side, 159 for Trump, Nikki Haley 21, and Ron DeSantis, who of course we know announced the suspension of his campaign, got 5 votes. We have 2 districts here, so that is for District 9. On the Precinct 6 side of things, which is the one that was tallying votes over there, you can see them finalizing just a little bit of what they've got, but they too have transmitted their votes to the county. They had a lot more on the Republican side. Trump, 202 votes. Nikki Haley, 28 votes. Uncommitted, 3, again, preliminary numbers that they've told us here. And then on the Democratic side, it was a lot fewer, 13 for Joe Biden, 2 for Dean Phillips, and 5 for uncommitted. Again, preliminarily is what they told us here. It kind of falls in line with what we heard as far as a wide range of opinions from voters here today. We heard from very strong Biden supporters who felt the most important issues to them were the economy and feeling like they needed to have someone they could trust in the White House, but of course, strong Trump supporters and some who just couldn't vote for Joe Biden this time around.
So, Omar, in that first precinct, what were the numbers for Biden and uncommitted again, just for that first precinct?
The numbers, so this would be for District 9 that we were just talking about. The numbers for Biden were 29 votes and uncommitted was 13.
Very interesting.
Here in Waterford.
Okay, Omar, thanks so much. What do you make of that? I mean, 13 uncommitted, 29 for Biden. That's a lot of uncommitted. It's a small sample, but still.
If that continues, that's the question. So there's your first sample. And the one thing, for all the wonder of the magic wall, one thing I cannot do tapping here is know whether those votes Omar just read out, they're all from this county, whether they've already been reported by the county and the state. That part I can't tell, touching precinct by precinct doesn't exist. But they are consistent with what you're seeing in the math here. And the question is, in other precincts, obviously he's doing better than what Omar just said in the county so far. But the question is, where's that number? You're right. How significant is it? Because look, there's a history of voted uncommitted in the Michigan Democratic primary, so we want to be careful not to overstate it. At the same time, having been there, and our reporters on the ground there, Jeff Zeleny is in the heart of this in Dearborn, just west of Detroit. If Joe Biden is still fighting for his base, it makes it harder to beat Donald Trump. And Michigan, look at 2016. Trump beat Hillary Clinton in Michigan, broke the blue wall, won Wisconsin, went on to the White House. Joe Biden flipped the script, right? One Michigan, one Wisconsin, one your home state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth in 2020. This is the fight. The old blue wall, which has now become the Midwestern battlegrounds in a presidential election. If you come out to this and go back to look at it, let me come out, that's the primaries, but let me come here and look at it. This is the fight, right? This is it. It's here, here, and here, and here, and possibly here, but these 3 states tend to go. And Joe Biden's victory in Michigan in 2020 was his most comfortable of these 3, 154,000 votes. The question is, if you have most of the 200,000 Muslim Americans who live in Michigan mad at you, and you have a lot of the young students who were key to the Democratic victory in 2020 and the Democratic wins in Michigan in 2022 mad at you, then you're dealing with that. You're dealing with a base problem when you need to be reaching out to get the other guys' votes, especially Haley votes. And we'll see. The biggest takeaway I got from listening to Omar right there is that so far in the Republican primary tonight in Oakland County, which is, again, a suburban county just north of Detroit, it's 30%. If that holds up, what does she say about 30%? It does prove there's a third to 40%, somewhere from 30% to up to 45% of the party that doesn't want Donald Trump, that keeps voting for Nikki Haley. It's not enough to beat him. It's not enough to get delegates. The people who care most about that number are the Biden campaign. Those are potential voters. You're going to get them all? No. Most Republicans will come home. But if you can get some, same thing. Joe Biden has a problem with the Muslim Americans. He has a problem with the Arab Americans. He has problems with liberals who are mad about the war. He has problems with young voters who are mad about the war. Donald Trump has a problem there. The question is, who can pick the other guy's pocket?
Interesting. And one thing we should note as we watch the uncommitted votes come in, as you noted, Michigan has a tradition of thousands of people voting uncommitted. And in fact, in the last election, in the Democratic primary in 2020, about 20,000 people voted uncommitted. About 28,000 voted uncommitted in the Republican primary. And you keep going back every 4 years, and it's about 20,000 people in each party vote uncommitted. So I kind of look at that, and maybe you tell me what you think about this. I kind of look at that as the floor for the uncommitted movement this evening. 20,000 is like, that's kind of like what happens every election. They get 30, they get 40, they get 50,000. Well, now we're talking, that's a real protest.
Right. So if you look at roughly 20,000, and I think that's history says that's a fair number. One of the dynamics sometimes in those uncommitted votes is a certain candidate decides not to contest the state. Right. Back in 2008, the uncommitted vote was way higher because both Barack Obama and John Edwards didn't play in Michigan, and their voters voted uncommitted to sort of say, I want to go out and vote for my guy, but I can't vote for my guy. So it was much higher then. So the question this time, though, is there's nobody like that. There's not another Democratic candidate who said, oh, I'm going to skip Michigan because Biden's strong there. So that, I think, is a true protest vote, as opposed to in years past where there were different reasons for it. Or it's just, maybe let's not overstate that it's all about Israel-Gaza. Uncommitted is going to tell us people who had a chance to vote for an incumbent Democratic president or vote for his long shot challenger, and they chose to vote uncommitted. So it tells you, number one, they're unhappy. They're looking for something else than that. And then the question is, and our reporters on the ground will help us, how much of it is Israel-Gaza? How much of it is repairable? And how much of it may be irreparable? The front page of the Arab American News 6-8 weeks back was abandon Biden. And when you talk to them out there and you say, but that might help Trump win, some say, I'll think about that closer to November. Others say, I don't care, that this is a matter of principle, that I'm going to vote against Biden on a matter of principle, and if Trump wins, so be it. That's the challenge for the president. That's why his national security advisor, deputy national security advisor, was out there last week. That's why Ro Khanna, the Democratic House member, was out there last week trying to help him. That's why the campaign team was out there. This is a full court press, and Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who you know is from right down here in the Detroit area, she has been, they'll call it a five-alarm fire. She's been pulling every fire alarm she can find and saying, you better get out there, you're in trouble.
And one of the things that the people behind the uncommitted movement are trying to do tonight is send the message, look, it doesn't really matter what happens during the primary. Joe Biden's going to win the Democratic primary, but we're here, and Donald Trump only won Michigan by 10,000 votes in 2016. Right. You need us. Let me go to Diane Gallagher, who's at a voting location right now. And Diane, you're in Ann Arbor. What are people telling you about this uncommitted vote?
The exact conversation that you and John were just having. I spoke with several uncommitted voters here in Ann Arbor who gave various reasons for this vote. Now, I do want to get into some numbers that I just received. Of course, these are unofficial, but they have been transmitted from the city of Ann Arbor, Ward 5, Precinct 48. As far as the Democratic Party goes, President Joe Biden, 41 votes, Dean Phillips, 4, Marianne Williamson, 4, and uncommitted received 39. Just a 2-vote difference between Joe Biden and uncommitted. Now, on the Republican side, we have 6 votes for Nikki Haley, 15 for Donald Trump, and 3 for uncommitted, a total of 112 votes at this precinct. But look, I spoke with many uncommitted voters here in Ann Arbor, several of them telling me they are not a part of the Arab American community, but that this resonates with them, and this is their opportunity, they said, to have that protest, to let the president, who they did plan to vote for, they said in November, hear what they have to say about this particular issue.
So it's interesting. This is the math she just said on the Biden uncommitted. I left Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson out. 41-39. That's almost a tie, right? So that's one precinct. She's here. Washtenaw County is where Ann Arbor is. So countywide, Biden's doing much better, but still 25%. A 25%. This is a college. This is the main voting block here. It's Ann Arbor, the college town. So you have students who could vote there, then you have the infrastructure. University of Michigan's a giant place, right? Again, when we were on the campus, it's about 2 months back now, but when we were on the campus, we were there and they had a banner pulled out and they had a printout literally from Hamas, and they were writing the names on the banners. And there were students there. Many of them were Arab Americans, but there were many other students stopping by to help them. And we spoke to the head of the college Democrats who said they were trying to have a meeting to plan about the election, and all the energy was about Israel-Gaza. Now, the question is, as time passes and as the president's tone has shifted, as the president's policy has shifted, he now says he maybe can have a ceasefire by early next week. Can the president repair the damage? That is the question, because the damage, you see it right there. You just heard it from Diane. You see it in this one precinct. The damage is real. The damage is real. The question is, you have 8 months. Can you repair it?
All right, let's walk over to the panel right now. Is that what we're doing? Let me toss it to Dana. Dana Bash, on to you.
Thank you. And, as we continue that conversation, one of the main reasons we are so focused on Michigan tonight isn't because, and we can just repeat this, isn't because we are not sure who's going to win the Democratic primary and who's going to win the Republican primary. It's what does this tell us about November? And looking back in history, just go back to 2016. There was a very, very intense primary in Michigan between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win that primary. Bernie Sanders eked it out. And if you fast forward to the fall of 2016, Hillary Clinton ended up losing Michigan. And so that's one of many examples throughout recent history of places like Michigan and Michigan itself being a harbinger for problems that a candidate has in a primary that bear out in the general election. Is that one of the things that you're looking at and looking for here, David Chalian?
Definitely one of the things to look for in any primary contest, I think, is what, and it's not a one-for-one situation, we should note that, but what general election vulnerabilities are exposed by the coalition of folks that come out and vote the way they do inside the context of your primary? Because we all know politics is a game of addition, right? And you need a unified base of support from your own partisans to be in the ballgame for a general election. And so looking for cracks in the Biden coalition in these Democratic vote tallies tonight is what we're looking for. I mean, I'll just note, with 7% of the estimated vote in now, the uncommitted vote is already at 11,607 raw votes. So they've already crossed the ridiculously low expectation setting that they had set for 10,000. But we've only got 7% of the estimated vote in. So they're at 11,000 now. That raw vote number is going to grow throughout this evening, perhaps substantially. So we'll see how much of a protest statement is made here, but it doesn't mean, and this is important for us to remember all day long, that every single one of those uncommitted votes is a Donald Trump vote in the fall or a stay-at-home no Joe Biden vote. Perhaps the vast majority of these folks who are participating in a Democratic primary are making a statement tonight to try to change policy, but are going to be in this contest between Trump and Biden in the fall, and very well may be with Biden. But it does give the Biden campaign their to-do list in Michigan.
It is really the enthusiasm gap, which is probably the biggest challenge that Biden faces heading into November, getting the base energized, which is clearly a large protest vote will make it very clear about the amount of work that they have to do here. Which will be interesting, too, is just the challenges that each candidate has within their own party. For Biden, it is clearly the base. It's younger voters, minority voters, and here, Muslim voters, Arab American voters. Trump, the right of center voters, the suburban voters, those are the people that have been voting for Nikki Haley. How much of vulnerability do we see from him in tonight's results? So, as David said, we know the outcome here, the impact, what it means for November is what we're going to have to scrutinize here.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, we're doing vibe punditry, right? Because we know how it's going to end. We know Biden's going to win it. We know Trump's going to win it. And so instead, it's trying to feel where the conversation is going to be for Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the days ahead. I mean, one of the things, which is, I think it was a point that David made when we were on TV 14,000 years ago this morning, is one of the things I'm looking for is what is Nikki Haley's number when she's not been campaigning in Michigan, right? That shows you the more organic base kind of number. But, also we were just talking about Ann Arbor. That's a town, I'm sure, that went for Bernie Sanders in 2020. So it's heavy with college students, and it's early to figure out the vibes quite yet.
Although I believe that Michigan and Michigan State are on spring break right now. I've been reliably informed from a Michigander. We're counting down to our first chance to make projections in the Michigan primaries, and we're awaiting more results from polling places that have just closed. Up next, we're going to talk with Nikki Haley, as she's now warning Republicans that nominating Donald Trump will be suicide for the country. There's much more ahead on this primary night in Michigan. Stay with us. And we have another key race alert for you with actual votes coming in the Michigan Democratic Party primary. Incumbent President Joe Biden is in the lead with 78.7%. He has 67,346 votes. That is 53,553 votes ahead of uncommitted, but that's still a pretty big number for uncommitted. 16.1% of the vote, 13,793 votes. If that trend continues, that's going to be pretty big. Dean Phillips pulling up the rear, 2.6% of the vote. On the Republican side, Donald Trump, no surprise, in the lead with 63.7% of the vote. That's 60,879 votes, almost 30,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 32.4% of the vote. That's with 7% of the estimated vote in. John King, we're seeing increasing numbers of votes, actual votes coming in. It's exciting. Where are they coming in from?
Where they're coming in from is interesting, and where we don't have none yet, in some ways, is more interesting. Let's focus on the Democratic race, because you're right. We said 20,000 votes seems to be the normal vote, traditional vote for uncommitted. With about 8% of the estimated vote, you're already up to almost 14,000. So that tells you that number is going to go up. Here's what tells me it's going to go up even more. We have nothing. I'm going to start where we have no votes. That's backwards, right? Normally on an election night, you go where you have votes. This is Wayne County. This is where Detroit is, the campus of Wayne State, among the places we visited where there was a lot of anti-Biden sentiment, not big picture, but because of Israel-Hamas. Dearborn, right out here in the Detroit suburbs, Interstate 94, just to the west of Detroit. That's where Jeff Zeleny is. That's where you have your largest population of Muslim American, Arab American, and many Christians as well, Christian Palestinians, people who trace their family heritage back to the Middle East, who are mad at Biden. Some say abandon Biden, some just say protest Biden. That number is going to tell us a lot. When we see Wayne County, it's also the largest population center in the state of Michigan. So we're going to get the most votes from here. It's the Democratic base. This is it. So critical for the president. What else are we seeing? So you just pop around a few other places. This is Oakland County. As I mentioned, critical to winning the state of Michigan. Win Wayne County. Then you go out into the suburbs. You have Oakland here, Macomb here, 13%. 13.5%, 14% if you round that up. Again, you know, let's be careful. He's getting 80% of the vote. He's the president of the United States. He's getting 80% of the vote. So if you're home and you're a Biden fan, you're saying, why aren't you focusing on that? And we should focus on that. That's 80% of the vote. But that's nobody. That's an I'm mad at you vote. And in a state that can be so hotly contested, Hillary Clinton loses it, she's not president. Joe Biden wins it, he is president. In a state that matters so much, the I'm mad at you vote matters. And so we come back out and look, where else are we getting it? Kalamazoo, again, the urban areas that are important. Joe Biden won this by 18 points in 2020. So again, in a place you want to run up the numbers. Come November, this is a place you want to run up the numbers to offset Donald Trump's rural strength. So you have some people you need to talk to. That's what that tells you. That's a good number, but in a Democratic primary, Dean Phillips is getting nothing here. That's not I'm looking for an alternative. There's an alternative right there. That's an I'm mad at you vote for the most part, or you don't like Phillips. And so one more quick point, we'll switch to the Republicans. Jonah was just talking about this, and I think this is the fascinating debate as we go forward. At the moment, only 7% of the vote. Let's be patient with the results, but Nikki Haley's not winning any counties. Donald Trump's getting 64% of the vote. So the governor can clearly make the argument, about a third of Republicans here, we'll see what that number ends up, but a third here, 40% in my home state of South Carolina, 43% in New Hampshire, don't want Donald Trump. She's right, the math supports that. However, that's winning, and that's getting the delegates. 55 delegates at stake tonight. 16 of them are supposed to be awarded based on the primary results, but we're going to have 2 Republican conventions. If you want to go to a place where the Republican Party, the Trump effect, election denial, that has completely destroyed what used to be a strong, functioning Republican Party, go to the state of Michigan. They have 2 Republican parties. They're fighting in court over which one's the real one. Both of them will award delegates. Donald Trump will probably get all of them, and then they'll fight it out in court.
It is interesting, though, to consider the fact that tonight we really are interested in who is not voting for the person that's going to win. Right? Who is not voting for Donald Trump? Who is not voting for Joe Biden on non-committed? Because that exposes weaknesses for both men. Very interesting. Now we're going to hear from Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley, who's going to talk to Dana Bash. She's obviously trying to overcome Donald Trump's dominant position in this race.
Joining me now is Governor Nikki Haley. Thank you so much for being on. I want to look at what's happening in Michigan tonight. Set expectations, if you would. What are you hoping for when results are in Michigan?
Well, obviously, our goal is to be as competitive as possible. That's what this has always been. But look at what's happened in Michigan. You look back in 2012, Michigan was such a bright spot. I was there. They were, they had just passed right to work. They were winning seats up and down the ticket. It was just a great time for Michigan. But ever since Donald Trump became president, they've lost the governor's mansion. They've lost the state house. They've lost the state senate. The same thing has happened in Minnesota. Now, I was in Colorado earlier today. They haven't had a Republican get over 45% statewide since Donald Trump was president in 2016. It is a pattern we continue to see. You're seeing the same thing whether you look at all the early states. Donald Trump didn't get 40% of any of the Republican primary vote. It is a problem. He's not bringing people into the party. He's pushing people out of the party. Colorado today has 10% less Republicans than they had before when Donald Trump was president. And so this is just a pattern we continue to see.
Governor, I hear you sharpening even more your criticism against Donald Trump. But what about you? How do you want to do tonight?
You know what we want to, obviously we want to do well. I mean, that's the focus of this and all the Super Tuesday states is let's just keep going and running through the tape as much as we can. I mean, I was, in Minnesota this morning. I was in Colorado this afternoon. I'm now in Utah. I mean, that's the goal, is to try and hit as many Super Tuesday states as we can. But look, Donald Trump campaigned in Michigan for 8 years. I campaigned for 2 days. So our goal has been to try and reach as many people as we can, but we know he's got the advantage in that. But more than that, what we're trying to tell everyone, whether it's in Michigan, whether it's the Super Tuesday states coming forward, is look at what has happened. First, you've got Donald Trump. He can't win a general election. Look at the Marquette poll. It showed recently he's margin of error. I defeat Joe Biden by 18 points. But more than that, look at what's happened to the Republican Party. The Republican Party is now not just changing based on tone. It's changing based on policy.
Like what?
No longer is there any talk about fiscal responsibility. That used to be a pillar for the Republican Party. Yet you've got Donald Trump, who put us $8 trillion in debt, more than any other president. You've got Republicans now who opened up earmarks and pet projects again in Congress, passing through 7,000 of them last year. Donald Trump's not talking anything about shrinking government, stopping spending, cutting out the waste, none of that. And then he's changed the whole idea of peace through strength. We used to always talk about the strength of our alliances. Now you've got Donald Trump basically saying he's going to tell Putin to go and invade our allies who stood with us after 9/11. It's all a shift.
And Governor, given what you just said, which is all factually accurate about where the party is and isn't, or where Donald Trump is, I should say, given the fact that he has won so handily the first 4 major contests, isn't it possible that the party has moved and the party is about Donald Trump and not what you're describing, which might be the party of yesterday?
It is very possible. And, that's what we're doing is if 70% of Americans say they don't want Donald Trump or Joe Biden, we are giving them an option. What I am saying to my Republican Party family is we are in a ship with a hole in it. And we can either go down with the ship and watch the country go socialist left, or we can see that we need to take the life raft and move in a new direction. That's what this is about. It is very telling when now the RNC is not about winning races up and down the ticket. The RNC is now about Donald Trump. They made that very clear. So now that's become his legal slush fund. Do we not see what's happening here? And this is the issue, Dana, of all of this. The reason I fight is for my kids and your kids. Because look at what our kids have been through. They've gone through COVID. They look at the fact that there's $34 trillion in debt. They don't know what that means for them. They don't know how they're going to get a job. They don't know how they're going to make ends meet. They don't know if they'll ever be able to afford a home. And they're worried about war breaking out. And then we wonder why there's so much stress, anxiety, and depression. It's because our country is in a tent of anger and hatred and division. There's nothing normal about the chaos that Joe Biden and Donald Trump have given us. And our kids deserve to know normal. Can you imagine a country where a family could sit down for dinner and not have a political fight? Can you imagine someone being able to go to work and say what they think without worrying about being demoted? Can we imagine a country where we could strongly disagree but not hate each other? That's where I'm trying to go. And that's what I'm saying to the Republican Party and to the American public is this is a ship that is
What
sinking.
does it say about your party?
We have got to
that
get off
they're
the
not-
ship and start going forward.
What does it say about your party that, with respect, they're not buying what you're selling, given the results that we've seen so far?
We've only seen a handful of states vote. I mean, look, I have said this before. As much as the media wants to jump ahead, we're taking this one state, one day at a time. That's what this is about. If I got out when y'all were talking about it earlier, New Hampshire, South Carolina, whatever, it would be the longest general election race in presidential history. Still, if I got out today, it'd be the longest general election race in history. America is blessed to be a democracy. Let people vote. Now, in the next week, we're going to watch 20 states and territories vote. Let's let that happen.
Governor.
We are blessed to live in a country where hope still reigns, and we need to look for that hope. We need to look for that America we want our kids to have, and we need to fight for it. And I'm going to fight for it every step of the way.
Before I let you go, on that note, you're committing that you are going to be in this race through Super Tuesday.
I mean, we are in all the Super Tuesday states now. That's what this is all about, is making sure that we hit every state and letting them know, look, there is a voice out there for you. There is a way out. Yes, we are fighting through. Yes.
Yes, unequivocally, you're in through Super Tuesday.
Absolutely. We have a country to save. Absolutely.
Okay. Governor Nikki Haley, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks so much.
And we are awaiting more results in both parties' presidential primaries in Michigan, and we're getting closer to our first chance to make projections once the last polling places close, as our coverage continues after a quick break.
And we got another key race alert for you right now with more actual votes coming in the Michigan Republican primary with 8% of the estimated vote in. Donald Trump still in the lead with 63.7% of the vote, 70,964 votes. He's almost 35,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 32.3% of the vote, or a total right now of 36,014 votes. That's with 8% of the estimated vote in. Now, on the Democratic side, incumbent President Joe Biden is in the lead with 78.4% of the vote, 75,967 votes. That's a little bit more than 60,000 votes again ahead of uncommitted. Uncommitted, many of these we believe to be protest votes because of Biden's support for Israel during the Israel-Hamas war. Uncommitted has 16.4% of the vote. That's almost 16,000 votes. Congressman Dean Phillips has 2.6% of the vote. That's 2,521 votes. That's with 10% of the estimated vote in. If that trend continues, that's going to be a pretty sizable uncommitted vote, theoretically. Let's go now to CNN's Kylie Atwood in Salt Lake City, Utah. Nikki Haley is campaigning there for next week's Super Tuesday contests, 1 week from today. Kylie, what is Haley looking for in the results out of Michigan this evening?
Well, listen, you heard it there in that interview with Dana that Nikki Haley is not being super specific in terms of what she would like to see in Michigan. She said, of course, the campaign would like to do well. They would like to see a competitive result, but not defining what that would mean. And I think Nikki Haley's campaign has said it time and time again that they are sticking with it through Super Tuesday. So really we're focused on what this week looks like for her and what she will be able to do in terms of getting voters on her side in those Super Tuesday states ahead of that critical date for her a week from today. But one interesting thing, Jake, that I've been told by a campaign official is that the Haley campaign isn't only looking at the results tonight on the Republican side in the Michigan primary. They're also looking at the results on the Democratic side because they believe that if there is a high number of uncommitted voters, that could demonstrate a potential weakness for Biden with certain voting blocks. Now, I spoke with one campaign official who said, obviously, they don't expect that those voters who are voting uncommitted are fertile ground for Nikki Haley. They oppose Biden because of his position on the Israel-Hamas war. Haley's position on that isn't all that different, so it wouldn't attract those voters. But it's interesting because they're trying to look at Biden's weaknesses right now as they are talking about Haley being a better overall contender in the general election against Biden, as she has been trying to go after Trump and his electability, saying that if he were the actual candidate on the Republican side, it would be like suicide for the party, saying that earlier today. Jake?
All right, Kylie Atwood covering the Nikki Haley campaign in Salt Lake City, Utah. Anderson?
Jake, thanks so much. Back to the team here in New York. David Axelrod, how big a deal is it for the Biden campaign, this uncommitted vote?
Well, listen, Michigan is going to be very, very close. It's going to be a marginal race. And so it matters if people are expressing themselves in ways that might suggest they're going to walk away. I'd caution, however, drawing too much of a point on this because we're 8 months away from this election, and it's one thing to register your discontent with the president in a primary. It's another thing in a race against Donald Trump. And, Governor Whitmer was on with Dana on Sunday, and she pointed out that Donald Trump's relationship with the Arab American community, with the Muslim community, is pretty checkered, and that people are going to have to think about that choice. She said a vote for uncommitted today is a vote for Donald Trump. Obviously, there are a fair number of people who wanted to make that vote. And I would also stress, we saw the Ann Arbor vote. This is an issue not just with the Arab American community, but it's an issue with younger voters, which is a problem nationally for Biden motivating these younger voters and some African American voters. So I think this is clearly an issue. I think it's one of the reasons why he was eager to say yesterday he thought that a ceasefire was within reach.
You know, Turner, you
I was just
suggested
there.
people vote uncommitted.
I did.
Why do you think that's not a vote for Trump?
It's not. I mean, Anderson, a vote for Trump is a vote for Trump. And I believe that Governor Whitmer is being disingenuous at best, lying at worst, in terms of telling the voters in Michigan that a vote for uncommitted is a vote for Donald J. Trump when Donald J. Trump is not on the ballot. This is a primary. And the last time I checked, we often, especially Democrats, we talk about the democratic process, small d, and people being able to express themselves in a primary as a bedrock. And then, though, to try to guilt those voters to not vote uncommitted when that is an option that they have on the Michigan ballot. I was just in Dearborn on Sunday. I was with Congresswoman Tlaib at a Free Palestine, ceasefire event. Hundreds of people in that room. I got a chance to talk to some individuals, and they are really upset. And some will, I know some of this the points have been made, but some people are willing to just let Donald J. Trump win. And their point is this. It's not that they want him to win. They're not jumping up and down for him. But what they are saying is that Donald J. Trump is not lording over the slaughter of innocent people in the Gaza. There are babies that were born after October the 7th who were born and took a few breaths and died. People can't get hospital care. So this is really palpable in Michigan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that truth, I mean, to both David and Nina's point, that you have to give some credibility, more than some credibility. You have to give credibility to the passion that many of these voters are coming out with that are voting uncommitted. The fact remains that there are a few things. One, this president has been working diligently towards a ceasefire. He has been working diligently towards humanitarian aid. And those things have to be recognized, and maybe it's a job of messaging from the White House. We know he just came out recently saying that this was something that could happen in the upcoming weeks. But the fact still remains that this is, if you look at the results from tonight, right, and I think back to 2012, David knows this better than I do, but in 2012, there were about 20,000 people that came out and voted uncommitted for Barack Obama. And he still won over Mitt Romney, who's a native of Michigan, by 9 points. And so while I do believe that there are certain changes that have to be made from this White House, this is not anything that you need to put your blinkers on or throw your hands up and say, oh my God, this is something that is going to change the trajectory of the race. Because at the end of the day, and I think Nina will agree with me on this, voting uncommitted today is an exercise of your little d capabilities and your little d democratic values. But it's totally different than voting for Donald Trump in November. And I think that this, I do not equate the two to be the same, and I disagree with Governor Whitmer on that. But I will say that this tonight does not give me any heartburn for Joe Biden. The heartburn that people should feel is that for Donald Trump, because there are a third of the people, 40% of the people who are outwardly rejecting Donald Trump. Again, we see it again and again and again in every single primary. He has the problem. Republicans have the problem. Democrats do not.
So I see it a bit both ways. Listen, we knew 6 in 10 Americans didn't want this rematch of Trump versus Biden. And the reality is both candidates have major vulnerabilities with core demographics they need to win. With Biden, it's young progressives, it's some of the black community, some of the Arab American community. With Donald Trump, it's women in the suburbs, it's people with a college degree. And it's really going to be a matter of who can message in these core swing states where, by the way, Donald Trump is ahead in all of them at this date today, which is a snapshot in time. Who's going to be able to message better to say, you need to be with me when the election comes down? And an interesting fact point, just as we talk about the issue with Gaza, is there are quite a few moderate Republicans who are inclined to vote for someone other than Donald Trump and who could be won over by Joe Biden. But if Joe Biden goes too far in pulling support away from Israel, you also could risk losing those moderate votes. So it's a delicate dance that he has to do.
Congressman, what are you looking for tonight?
I think that we're heading towards a really competitive race come November. The state's up for grabs. The Rear Clear Politics average is showing the race a little over 5 points in favor of Donald Trump. Currently, all the polls that have come back have shown him up. I'm looking at some of the most populous counties in the state. We're waiting for the results to come in. Inside of Wayne, obviously looking at Oakland. You have Flint, Michigan, in Genesee, Grand Rapids, in Kent. The results will come in Marquette, which is an area that Democrats perform well in. Saginaw has predicted the winner statewide every race since 1992 and is a boomerang pivot county where you have Obama, Trump, Biden. So we'll see what happens inside these most populous counties. And as Bakari was pointing out,
Are you about to agree with me? I don't know how I feel about this.
Well, listen, when you dig deeper into the results to get a measure of where support is of both parties, and Alyssa was talking about this as well, there's a gender gap, but it's not as big as maybe President Biden would want. The most recent polling that's come out shows a closer race amongst women than I think President Biden would want. College age voters, President Biden won by 17 votes. Most recent polling is showing it closer, more like 6. Independence was won by President Biden, but the current polling is showing President Trump up right now. So digging deep into these most populous counties and seeing what's going on inside the Democratic Party, I think my advice to both campaigns is campaign like you're scared, campaign like you're behind. Well, I think both parties will get a takeaway.
The other thing to keep in mind is the GOP in Michigan is at war with itself right now. There are 2 people claiming to be the chair of the party. They're having dueling conventions on Saturday. It's like a complete mess. But on the numbers that we're looking at, Nikki Haley was correct in her point there, saying that the Republicans in Michigan have not done well, talking about what that looks like. But on these numbers, as we're watching the uncommitted vote come in, which obviously the White House is paying close attention to, the 10,000 was a ridiculously low bar, as David Chalian pointed out, but they're already at 15,000 with only 10% coming in. We could easily see this getting up to closer to 100,000. The question for the White House then is, do those voters come home in November?
Just minutes from now, the last polling place is closed. Let's go back to Jake in D.C.
Thanks, Anderson. We're going to get a fuller picture of how President Biden is faring tonight as he faces not only long-shot challenger Congressman Dean Phillips, but also that protest vote for uncommitted. It's being urged by Democrats who are pushing for a permanent ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war and also pushing for the U.S. to cut all military aid to Israel. In the Republican primary, Donald Trump is looking for another decisive victory over Nikki Haley to extend his winning streak and bring him closer to amassing the delegates he needs to lock up the GOP presidential nomination. Let's go over to John King now at the Magic Wall. John, more votes coming in. Where are they coming in from?
We're starting to get a good scattering across the state, which makes it interesting. You get to see rural areas. Let's pop up here. You know, Kalkaska County, rural area. Donald Trump won this county by 40 points. So this is not something Joe Biden's worried about come November. The Republicans going to win this. But you're just trying to see, is the uncommitted vote as high in these rural counties where you don't have as many Democrats? You tend to have more conservative Democrats if you do have them there. So it's 7.5% up in these tiny rural counties. But then you come down, it's still at 16% statewide. Nearing 17,000 votes. And so we did get, since last year visited, our first votes from Wayne County. Just want to caution you, it's a tiny. This is one precinct, probably a sample precinct somewhere. But still, 23% right there. That, to me, is the question of the night. What is that percentage and what is that number in Wayne County? Because this is ground zero, if you will, of the discontent. Dearborn is right over here to the west of Detroit, inside Detroit. The liberal base is mad about this policy. On the Wayne State campus, they're mad about this policy. So this, to me, is ground zero. And if you want to run up the numbers statewide, this is where you would do it. So you come out and look, you start to move around Kalamazoo again. You're moving west. You're getting out. It's almost, it's 19%. But again, very early numbers. So let's be careful. So look, you have a very formidable front runner on the Democratic side. He's not going to be beat. Joe Biden's going to beat the nominee. The question is, the challenge is always bring the base home or bring the voters who are against you home. Those are voters, they're not voting for anybody else, but they're mad at him. And it's the same issue. They were just talking about this in New York on the other side. If you come over here, Democrats would say that's a bigger deal, right? 32% of your party is voting against the former president, Donald Trump, in a state that has been absolutely critical to his success and to his failure in 2020. So both frontrunners have a challenge. Both are winning quite comfortably. but both have a problem bleeding in their own party, if you will. A third, just shy of a third of Republicans there saying we don't like Donald Trump. So let's look here where this is coming in. Oakland County, this one here, 32%. Again, how do you want to read that, right? In a suburban county that has trended Democratic come November, is that a good sign for Donald Trump? Well, those are voters Joe Biden's going to target right there.
Right.
Republicans in the suburbs who don't want to vote for Donald Trump. Macomb County, blue collar, back in the 1980s, this was the whole Reagan Democrat thing. Donald Trump beat Joe Biden in Macomb County last time. This is a big test of that United Auto Workers endorsement for President Biden. He's meeting with the Teamsters coming up. This is a union place. This is a blue collar place. And you see the difference, right? In a blue collar place, that's Donald Trump's wheelhouse. He's getting a better number in Macomb than he does over in Oakland. Suburbanites, more blue collar. You see right there how Donald Trump has literally remade the Republican Party as you come through it. If you come out, I just want to look as you start moving out of the state. Nothing from Grand Rapids yet. I'm interested in that just because of how much it factors in Republican turnout. But as you're trying to move west here, Nikki, this is only 11%, but in the more rural areas, Trump is stronger. But you're still, that's still a little bleeding in your base. So again, you look at the Haley number there, and you look at the uncommitted number here, and what you see is Joe Biden's going to win Michigan tonight. Donald Trump's going to win Michigan tonight, most likely. You see the numbers coming in. You're waiting for a few more votes before you can call that race. But as you do so, this is what a smart winner does every time. I won, but where's my weakness? For Joe Biden, it's right there. And for Donald Trump, it's that Nikki Haley, Jake, is still getting at least 3 in 10 or more Republican votes.
All right, John, the last polling places are just about to close in the Michigan Democratic and Republican primaries. President Biden looking to beat back a protest vote, while Donald Trump is aiming for another win that catapults him towards closer towards a rematch with Biden. And we can now make some important projections. CNN is projecting now that Donald Trump will win the Michigan Republican presidential primary. This will be his 5th straight major victory of the primary season, and another loss for Nikki Haley as she persists in her fight against Trump despite his growing advantage in the all-important hunt for delegates, which is, of course, what is needed to win the GOP presidential nomination. Again, CNN projecting Donald Trump will win the Republican primary in Michigan, teeing up a blockbuster Super Tuesday contest next week. CNN can also project that President Joe Biden will win the Michigan Democratic primary, continuing his march toward his 2nd presidential nomination, and once again, defeating his long-shot opponent, Congressman Dean Phillips. But we are still watching the size of a protest vote in Michigan. Some Michigan Democrats are voting for uncommitted, specifically to show their opposition to the president's policy on the Israel-Hamas war. Many of them pushing for a permanent ceasefire and urging the United States to cut military aid to the state of Israel. Let's go look at the vote right now for Joe Biden. With 10% of the estimated vote in, President Joe Biden, the incumbent, has 78.5% of the vote. That is 83,828 votes, about 66,000 votes ahead of uncommitted, which has 16.2% of the vote. We're looking at the raw number, though, really, of uncommitted number tonight, and it's 17,289. Dean Phillips, 2.7% of the vote, bringing up the rear. And Dana, if we look at 20,000 as the floor for uncommitted, because we know in every presidential primary in recent years, there has been 20,000 people who have just voted uncommitted.
Right.
They're a feisty bunch in Michigan, I suppose. Democratic side and Republican side, at least 20,000 vote uncommitted. So we're looking for a number above that. It looks pretty clear that they're going to hit that and maybe exceed it well beyond their own expectations.
Which is why Governor Whitmer of Michigan told me on Sunday, why the senior senator from Michigan, Debbie Stabenow, told Casey Hunt today that they really didn't know how it was going to end up. But what they did see, and we still don't know how it's going to end up, but what they are seeing is a very passionate effort to send President Biden a message. And I think that we should really underscore the idea that that's what they're trying to do. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. They genuinely are trying to affect policy. Are there some people who just don't like Joe Biden who might stay home in November? Absolutely. But those people probably are staying home today as well. Mm-hmm. And so the question is whether or not given the fact that President Biden has already shifted in his rhetoric and in his approach to Israel, whether or not if they do get the numbers to send that message, how much of an effect will it have?
Yeah, and the one senior Michigan Democratic source that I've been speaking with tonight says this is actually higher than they expected in terms of the uncommitted vote. We'll see how high it gets, but this does appear likely to exceed. Probably the closest thing we can compare it to is in 2012, an incumbent Democratic president against a Republican, 20,000 votes, just over 20,000, the uncommitted vote here. That is almost certainly going to pass here and surpass this. The question, as you mentioned, how do the people who were leading this effort, where do they end up in November? I had a chance to ask Rashida Tlaib, who's, of course, leading also this push she's for the uncommitted vote. She's, of course, Palestinian-American, someone who's been a very aggressive opponent of the way that this war has been waged and the president's handling of it. I said, will you support Joe Biden in November? She did not respond to that question. And that's going to be the big question for the Biden campaign. Can you win some of these people back when it's not uncommitted on the ballot? Right. It's Biden versus Trump.
I mean, the difference from 2012, of course, is that there's an organized campaign effort here for uncommitted. That wasn't present in 2012.
Run by Rashida Tlaib's sister.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think there's always a danger of us over-interpreting this. There's no doubt about that. There's also no doubt, to your point, Dana, that this is what a protest looks like. This is what protest is.
Right.
This is a push for a policy change. The other X factor, guys, that we do not know sitting here today, where is the Israel-Hamas situation going to be in August, in September, in October, when people are voting? Is it going to be as fresh for everyone who's voting today in the Democratic primary in Michigan then as it is now? That's an unknowable thing, of course. What you do know, and obviously Biden is responding to it, is that this is just one piece of a coalition that is not as unified, united, and back in full force as it was in 2020 when he got elected. This is one piece of it. Young voters, progressives that we're seeing in various demographic slices. Joe Biden and his operation are keenly aware across the board they are not performing at the same levels with some key constituencies that they need to be at, not just in Michigan, but in a whole slew of these battleground states. And this is what we learn on a night like this. It is what the work they need to do to bring that back together for the fall.
Yes, I agree with all of that. And, part of the problem that Biden has is he has a much bigger coalition than Donald Trump does. Donald Trump has a very focused, narrow coalition, deeply committed. It's stronger, but it's smaller. Biden's is larger, but it's weaker. And so the various components of it, they're all vying to sort of get primacy inside the coalition. I do think you can overread, there's a certain bias in this, and it's not an ideological bias. It's that this is the thing to talk about, right? This is the thing that is happening, that is filling the oxygen of this story. And, there's something Dana and I talked about the other day on IP, is that if the situation were reversed and Biden went the other way and became all in on the Rashida Tlaib position, how many votes would he lose? How many uncommitteds would we be seeing voting for the pro-Israel position? Because I still believe the issue of Israel is more popular. Israel has more support in the state of Michigan generally than the Palestinian version of it. And so when you look at these people, you think about who's the most committed to the Palestinian cause, which is an understandable thing to be. Of course, they're going to be voting uncommitted, but there's really no price they're paying for doing it. There's no cost in doing this. These are the people who are showing up. And so I do think you can overinterpret it simply because it's the thing that we're all talking about.
No, of course. But I think one of the things that the Arab American and Muslim American community launching this protest is saying is not necessarily we're going to vote for Trump in November, not necessarily even we're not going to vote in November, but look how many of us there are who care about this issue. Donald Trump won Michigan in 2016 by 10,000 votes. Joe Biden won it by 154,000 votes 4 years later. There are a lot of us, we can swing an election if you don't pay attention to us more seriously. And remember, he has sent aides to visit with the Arab American and Muslim American communities in Michigan. He himself has not gone. Let's go to John King right now, and we're still watching the vote come in. There's 11% of the estimated vote in. Joe Biden still in the lead, 78.4%. Uncommitted, 17,872 votes, John King.
Right, and so we'll go through the numbers in the context of the conversation you were just having, because I think Jonah framed it actually quite well there in the idea of, what percentage of these people, 16%, that's a lot. We'll see how it goes as the night comes in. What percentage of them are saying, I'm mad at you, Mr. President, I'm mad at your policy, and it directly affects me in the case of the Arab Americans and the Muslim Americans, it directly affects me and my family. How much of them are just mad tonight, and how much of them are, let's call them never Biden, right? The Arab American News was trying to run a campaign saying abandon Biden. They mean abandon him in November as well. Don't just vote uncommitted tonight. So how much of that lasts, right? So that's the question on the Democratic side. And it's the very same question on the other side. Because, about a third, a little less than that right now, voting against Donald Trump in Michigan tonight, a state that was absolutely critical to him in 2016. It was absolutely essential to Biden in 2020. What percentage of that comes home, maybe reluctantly, but comes home to the Republican Party? And what percentage of that is a never Trump? If you're the never, then you're available to the other person. Right? You're at least a thought is available. And that's the part we don't know, and that's the conversation going forward. So the headline is Donald Trump, you mentioned at the top of the hour, just look at that. Just look at that. This is the Republican contest so far. The Virgin Islands down here as well. And so if you look at this right now, Donald Trump, like him or not, has every right to make the case, I'm winning in the heartland. I'm winning in the heartland again. I won in New England. I won in the South. I won out West by convincing margins. I'm going to be the Republican nominee. Everyone, including Governor Haley, should recognize that fact. That will be his argument. Of course, she makes the argument, no, a third or more of the party keeps voting against him. They need a voice. I'm going to stay in. A week from tonight, when you have a bunch of states voting on Super Tuesday, I think will be probably the last defining test of that. If you're the Democratic president, you're saying, okay, Dean Phillips made some noise. Tonight, uncommitted is going to make some noise. And yes, I understand I have some repair work to do, but I'm an incumbent Democrat, and I'm marching to the nomination. The issue is this state is so important. And so, yes, we should not overstate what's happening tonight, but we should also understand how important this state has been in recent presidential history. And so that's your base, right? That's your base. And one of the things I'm waiting for, we still don't have, this is just one precinct. This is going to tell us a lot more about how we should shape this conversation, how serious we should be about that uncommitted number at the end of the night. Wayne County has Detroit, the African-American Democratic base, the Wayne State young voters base, Dearborn just out to the west in the suburbs, that is your Muslim American, Arab American, Middle Eastern Democratic base. It's 300,000 votes in the state, a lot of them right here. They were for Joe Biden in 2020. When you win a state in that year, come back to 2020, let's look at the presidential race. When you win a state by 154,000 votes, you can lose 20,000, you can lose 30,000, but I'll make this point. You can't lose a big slice of your base because you see that number? Donald Trump lost Michigan in 2020. Look at that 2.64 million. In 2016, he won it with 2.2 million. Donald Trump got more votes in several of the battleground states in 2020 than he did in 2016 when he won them. The Democrats just turned out more votes. Biden was more successful with young voters, more successful with Arab Americans, more successful in the suburbs and Anderson. So that's the challenge. The two front runners are going to win tonight. We know that. The question is, how deep are the weaknesses?
Yeah. And we're going to be looking at that very closely. Let's go to CNN's Jeff Zeleny in Dearborn, Michigan right now. He is at an event for Democratic advocates of that protest vote for uncommitted. So, Jeff, what is the feeling there about how the protest is going? What level of protest do they expect to see?
A Jewish guy from Detroit, right? From Michigan.
Well, Anderson, this event began with a moment of silence
I'm
for all
really
of the children who have been slain in Gaza. After that, it really erupted in applause. You can hear perhaps behind me here now, former Congressman Andy Levin is on the stage right now, sort of offering a roadmap from here. He says this is not the end, this is the beginning. And that is the sentiment that we are getting here at the Adonis restaurant, a Middle Eastern restaurant in Dearborn, the heart of the Arab American community, the Muslim American community here in Michigan. And there is a sense that they have already won a success. Regardless of the number of votes, they believe they've gotten President Biden's attention. Indeed, they have. But Anderson, they are just going to go forward with this. They said they plan to pressure him over the next 8 months. So this uncommitted effort here certainly now is just beginning, not ending.
And that we build a more beautiful democracy.
Thanks very much. Back with the team here in New York. Do you have a sense? I mean, we did hear from President Biden, I think it was just yesterday, saying that his national security advisor had seemed to indicate that there was movement on a potential ceasefire or prolonged cessation. That was not echoed, certainly by the Palestinian side or even officials in Israel.
Yeah, look, I don't know exactly what happened there. The fact that he was standing there in an ice cream parlor with an ice cream cone in his hand. No, well, with Seth Meyers, yeah. But it suggested to me that he was maybe going out on his own on that one, that he wasn't, that he, and probably because he understood that this was going on. But, so I don't know. It could be that that was a planned play. It seemed like a weird place to do it. If it wasn't, I bet you there was some heavy gasps of exasperation.
In the National Security Council?
Yes, yeah,
Probably
exactly.
screaming into a pillow. And it is, I think it was very spontaneous. Obviously, that wasn't something that was a planned moment. Reporters just shout questions and he answers. But it is different than how they've handled the last ceasefire that happened. The White House was so careful to talk about it until it was actually official, because we've seen them come close to having a ceasefire and then for it to fall apart. And so Ro Khanna, a congressman who's been in Michigan stumping for Biden, who previously had not called for a ceasefire, is now calling for one. He said he did believe that that was intended to try to kind of blunt this momentum towards the uncommitted vote tonight.
Yeah. But I mean, just think about it. I mean, you talked about a snapshot in time, and Nina was talking about the process playing out, and we still have 9 months. Yeah. And so, I mean, if this president is able to continue to work towards humanitarian aid for Gaza, we know that Donald Trump has cut $200 million in aid to Palestine. If this president's able to secure the hostages, if he's able to actually land a cessation of fire in the Middle East and still continuously advocate for a two-state solution, then you have a different playing field between now and then. What these voters are doing is raising their voices and saying, this is an issue that matters to us tonight. This is an issue that matters to us tomorrow, and the White House needs to listen. And I think the White House is listening to that message. But, you know, this is, if he's able to reel off these successes, then tonight actually will be a success for all, and you'll have a different outcome come November, because I'll pass it to Nina or whomever can help me understand this. But I don't think for many voters who are voting uncommitted that they're going to vote uncommitted and then say Donald Trump is my choice. I think this is more complicated than that.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Bakari. I mean, no one that I interface with said that they wanted to vote for Donald J. Trump. There is a however here. And I think sometimes as we talk about this issue, we're centering President Biden. We are centering former President Donald J. Trump, when the uncommitted effort is to center the people closest to the pain. And that is the Arab American community. That is the Palestinian community. That is communities that care about peace. And so while this president was in the ice cream shop saying, I think there's going to be a ceasefire, 30,000 people have been slaughtered. People are living in famine. They can't get medical care, so it can't come soon enough for them. And that was really the weight that I picked up on when I was in Dearborn. So we get to be comfortable and talk about this like these people are widgets when they are in fact suffering. And I am young enough to remember, colleagues, when Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and also Congresswoman Cori Bush called for a ceasefire very early on. They were called abhorrent. Now, fast forward to all of these bodies laying in the wake and people who are living through this every single day.
So by the way, there's also been slaughter in Israel.
I was going to say.
So there's a lot of pain on both sides.
No,
I'm not really need a lecture on the problem. But I'm talking about the politics of this tonight. What to you would be a victory, as somebody was calling for this uncommitted vote, what to you would be a victory tonight to get that message across?
I'm not denying that pain. All I'm saying that at a certain point after October the 7th, it becomes clear. I mean, you have a right-wing prime minister.
Right. We don't need to debate the issue.
But you understand what I'm saying? I'm not denying anybody's pain. What I am saying is that this president and our country has the power to say to Netanyahu, we need a permanent ceasefire. The only time hostages...
reason, though, if I can push back here...
Wait, one more point. The only time hostages were released is when we had that brief ceasefire. That is another reason why we need a permanent ceasefire.
I also have to remind people we had a ceasefire prior to October 7th, right? I mean, that's a point. And I get centering people, and I completely understand that. But I think, Anderson, your point is valid as well, that there is a lot of pain to go around, and we cannot forget that. But I'm talking about tangible solutions. That's what I'm. And as we look at because we can debate and talk about this on a level of humanity, which we cannot forget. But we also have to look at the results from tonight. And what I'm saying is that there are tangible results this White House can deliver, and I think if they're able to deliver, now if they miss. then you have a totally different scenario.
And here's
come
the
November.
reality. If I may briefly defend Joe Biden, there hasn't been a day since October 7th that he hasn't been working around the clock, his National Security Council, his State Department, with the Qataris, with the Israeli government to try to come to a cessation of hostilities.
I mean, he thinks the president is also the president of Mexico, but that's okay.
They do have a massive messaging problem, though. They have allowed this sort of discontent with young progressives to take so much steam that you're seeing it play out in real time. And a problem that they might run into, if this is something that ends up being, you know, upwards of 50,000 votes tonight, are other states going to follow? Are there going to be other organizing efforts in primaries to show that they won't be with Biden unless they see a change in policy?
Yes, the uncommitted campaign is going to go. I mean, I've been told that that campaign is going to go into other states.
And Congressman, on the Republican side, I mean, if it's right now it's 30. We're looking at if it's 30% for Haley, what message does that send?
This is a large gap. And going on to Super Tuesday, they're showing polls coming back where President Trump's up by 40 points, 50 points. He's on pace to have a very big night next Tuesday. And I would just say it's something that's really important and really both parties, all parties, to pay attention to this conversation we're having. October 7th and what's happened since has been the highest profile issue that can be a motivator. But what's really important, digging deeper, the Arab American community, just like all Americans, they're concerned about other issues. So, you know, if you live in Wayne County, your cost of housing is higher than the state average. You're concerned about the cost of groceries. You have an American dream of being able to afford your first home. You might be concerned about crime just as much as your neighbor. And the underlying issues, really, by the way, for any group we talk about, it's important whether you are President Trump's campaign manager, you're President Biden's campaign manager, that you understand what else is motivating all of these people and why is it that they are responding as much to the call. Because if they were happy with President Biden across the board, other than this issue, I don't think that we would be seeing a number like this on young people.
I don't know about that, Congressman. I mean, I think that you're going to see an elevated vote in those communities, and it's very much related to this issue. And so the question is, how much more elevated is that uncommitted vote in those communities? I suspect it's going to be much higher. But I just have to, one last word on this, Nina. You mentioned the ceasefire and the last ceasefire. That last ceasefire happened in part because the president pushed for that ceasefire. He's clearly trying to use his leverage to bring this ceasefire about. And I'm one who I was appalled and personally wounded by what happened on October 7th, and I weep for the kids in Gaza as well. I don't think you can hold both thoughts at once, but I do believe, I don't think that, he's not green lighting these activities. He's clearly trying to pressure the Israelis on this issue.
Well, actually, no doubt about it. October the 7th, horrible, should never have happened. You don't kill innocent people, no way, no how. There is a point, and I want to go back to something the congressman said. I think these issues are intertwined. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think to the extent that you have people who are burdened with domestic challenges, what is happening overseas is a reflection of that anxiety that we are having here. My only point is that being on the ground and talking to people, when you're the person who has lost a family member on either side, right? You're saying relief cannot come soon enough, and that is something that we should not forget.
Yeah. Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake? Thanks, Anderson. Let's bring you a key race alert because we have more votes coming in on the Democratic side. President Joe Biden, the incumbent, with an estimated 13% of the vote in, has 79.1% of the vote. That's 106,127 votes. That's 85,391 votes ahead of uncommitted. Uncommitted has 15.5% of the vote. That's 20,721. What's significant about this, we should note, is that every primary, there are about 20,000 votes for uncommitted on the Democratic side and the Republican side, every primary. So they've hit the floor of 20,000 with only 13% of the estimated vote in, meaning uncommitted is going to have a night like we haven't seen in a long, long time. On the Republican side, Michigan, in the Republican primary, Donald Trump in the lead with 65.9% of the vote, 123,790 votes
That's more than 67,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley at 56,049. She has slipped down under 30% now with 29.8% of the vote. That's again with 13% of the estimated vote in. John King, we should note, yes, there was in 2008 because the Michigan Democratic Party went against the rules. So Hillary Clinton was the only one that was in the contest. So Edwards voters and Obama voters voted non-committed. This is different than that. That was a lot of uncommitted. This is different than that. Uncommitted, we don't know how many of the people voting uncommitted are voting as a protest of President Biden's support for Israel in the way that Netanyahu is waging the war against Hamas in Gaza. But if we consider 20,000 to be the floor, we can extrapolate out that they're going to have a night like we've never seen for a protest vote in Michigan.
Right, and so you have two things can be true at once. President Biden's going to have an overwhelming victory, and President Biden's going to have a very important challenge for the people who vote uncommitted, because most of them, there's an organized campaign to get people to vote uncommitted. So as that number rises, you can attribute that to the success, especially. Again, we don't have many votes yet. We're stuck here. We got a few more votes from Wayne County, a little bit more. So let's see.
Still only 1%.
Yeah, still only 1%. So if that number stays at 11% in Wayne County, then the Biden campaign will be saying not a big deal. I suspect that number is going to grow when you get more from not only from Detroit, but from Dearborn, which again, where Jeff Zeleny is. That's the center of the Arab American community in Michigan, is in Dearborn. We don't have enough votes yet to make that calculation. But the 2 points thing is, that's a big win in a very important state. However, that shows you have trouble with your base. And how big is that trouble? How permanent is some of that trouble? How many of these people, as the conversations have been saying, are saying, I'm mad at your policy, Mr. President, and I want you to know that. And I want more meetings with your team. You made a key point. They understand now. A lot of Michigan Democrats will tell you they were late to understand. But they have been out there, the campaign, the national security team. You'll see the president and the vice president getting out there. You'll see them out there. But how much of that is we're just mad at you, we'd like some attention, and we'd like the policy to change. And we'll see if the policy does change or if there are improvements on the ground there. What percentage, though? There are some who say, as a matter of principle, they're saying that now. The election's 8.5 months away. But they say, I won't do it. I cannot vote for Joe Biden because of how he's standing by Netanyahu. Again, there are Haley voters coming out of the polls saying, I cannot vote for Donald Trump. I will not vote for Donald Trump. It's not that they don't mean it today. The question is, in time, most people tend to go back to their partisan home come November, especially in a consequential election. But I'll raise a point we haven't talked about tonight. Not only will you have the Republicans go back to Trump, and I'll just show the number. She's shy of 30%. And do the uncommitteds go back to Biden? What are the third-party options in Michigan? Right? What are the third-party? Is there somebody there you can go to? In the last two presidential elections have been so close. In 2020, the third-party candidates did not make the impact that they did in 2016. That doesn't mean they won't in 2024, as we see Robert Kennedy Jr., Cornel getting on at least 3 or 4 ballots. Cornel West saying that he'll have some progress to talk about there in a couple of weeks or so. So we need to watch that. In a place where you have people who are mad at their front runner, do they come home? Do they stay home? Or do they find someplace else? That would be the third party. One other quick point about Trump as we have this conversation. That's a pretty healthy lead, right? That's what, 36 points? I suspect it could grow. I would be wrong if Haley runs up big numbers here. We don't have any votes in Wayne County yet. Not a ton of Republicans in Wayne County. Detroit and the suburbs out. But there are Republicans there. So she has a chance to run up the numbers there. But you see all this blank gray? This is rural Michigan.
Right.
Up in the mitten, as they say. Just look. This is where Donald Trump gets 72. This is where Donald Trump gets 77. This is where Donald Trump gets 60. This is where Donald Trump gets 72. In most of this, Donald Trump's going to run it up. So you see a 66% percentage for him right now. Unless she makes up some ground down here in Detroit and in the suburbs right around it, that percentage could actually grow.
Yeah. Could you bring up the Democratic results again? Because it's such an excellent point you just raised. Because there's been a lot of talk about third-party candidates, like Robert Kennedy Jr. getting a lot of attention. But as you know, the real risk is on Biden's left, his left flank. And whether it is Cornel West or someone, Jill Stein, someone like that, running a very clear campaign against Israel, in favor of Palestinian rights, against Biden. We don't know how many of these people are going to then vote third party, but it could be a lot. And tonight, for the protest vote, for the uncommitted people, this is about flexing their muscles and showing the Biden campaign, look how many of us there are. This is Michigan. You will either win Michigan or lose Michigan based on how you act towards us. That's the message they are trying to send. I want to go to David Chalian right now for a second, just to get an update on the delegate count, because obviously this is, at the end of the day, a race for delegates. David?
Yes, Jake. So we are able to start allocating some of the delegates on the Democratic side based on the vote already coming in. So there are 117 delegates at stake tonight in Michigan on the Democratic side. You see it there in the upper right-hand corner. Joe Biden now has 27 delegates. We have 90 delegates that are so far unallocated. Dean Phillips has 0 delegates. If you look at delegates to date in the Democratic contest, you'll see that Joe Biden has 118 delegates to Dean Phillips' 0. The magic number, again up in the upper right-hand corner, 1,968 pledged delegates are needed for Joe Biden to secure the Democratic Party's nomination. He's going to do that, folks. It's just early in the process, and we've got many, many more contests to go. He's at 118. How do we get to these delegate allocations? On the Democratic side in Michigan, delegates are awarded proportionally. So you need at least 15% of the vote statewide or in a congressional district to win delegates. And I do want to note, since we're spending so much time talking about the uncommitted vote tonight, if uncommitted actually wins delegates, meaning they get to that 15% threshold statewide or in a congressional district, those delegates will go to the convention in Chicago unbound. They will not be bound to anybody. And obviously, we will watch as the process plays out as to who those humans are, the delegates that go through a convention process, and what they will do on the convention floor in Chicago from the state of Michigan, if indeed they're there because of this uncommitted vote tonight. Jake?
All right, fascinating stuff, David Chalian. So is it unfair of me to extrapolate that there's 15% of the estimated vote in, and we have more than 20,000. Is it unfair for me to extrapolate, wow, this number could get 80,000, 100,000?
I don't think it's unfair at all to extrapolate. It's going to get significantly bigger. How big? Just one quick point. You know, there's a lot of gray up here. That means no votes yet. Those are smaller rural counties, so there's not a lot of math there. However, we have nothing yet, barely nothing, 1% of the vote from Wayne County, which is by far the largest population center in the state, and by far the base of this anger at the president in Detroit, in Dearborn, elsewhere around there. So without a doubt, that number is going to grow quite significantly. Without your percentages, absolutely, if it continues to grow, if it stays consistent. As more votes come in, if it stays around 15% or so, you bet it's going to get up there.
And 100,000, sorry to interrupt, but 100,000, like Joe Biden won Michigan with 154,000 votes. Donald Trump in 2016 won Michigan with roughly 10,000 votes. Right. Those kinds of numbers really, really matter. We are standing by for even more actual votes to come in from Michigan, tracking support for President Biden in the Democratic primary and for the protest vote for uncommitted. Up next, we're going to talk to a key member of Michigan's congressional delegation who has been trying to warn the president for a long, long time. He has a problem in her state. We'll be right back.
Back with the key race alert. Right now in Michigan, Donald Trump has 66.3% to Nikki Haley's 29.2%. There you see Joe Biden with 79.6% of the vote. Uncommitted, 14.9%. That's 23,142 people. And Donald Trump, you see the 66.3% to Nikki Haley's 29.2%. CNN's Kristen Holmes is near Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach, Florida, covering the Trump campaign. What are you hearing from the former president's team tonight?
Well, Anderson, right now they're relatively quiet. Just remember, this was an anticipated win. He barely went to Michigan. Since he announced his candidacy, he has only been to the state 3 times. He's not even there tonight. He's gone to every other state so far on primary or caucus night. Instead, he's just dialing into a watch party to give a call. Now, that's because he was increasingly confident. But one thing that his team is going to use this race for is to really examine the data as it looks towards a general election rematch with President Joe Biden. And one thing they're going to particularly look for is those those union voting households. Remember, Donald Trump and his team are setting up a battle in 2024 for those working class voters that really helped propel Trump to the White House in 2016, but favored Biden back in 2020. Now, part of that is driving a wedge between Biden and organized labor. We saw Donald Trump in Michigan last week. He was talking about how migrants crossing the border was bad for workers. In September, he visited a non-union shop during an auto workers strike, intentionally telling them that Biden's policies on electric vehicles would again hurt union jobs. And I do want to give you the latest polling that we have on this on union household votings. Polling showed that Trump's support fell in union households from 48% in 2016 to 37% in 2020. But they do believe that they can get some of these rank-and-file union members to come back towards Donald Trump. We know the United Auto Workers has endorsed Joe Biden. The Teamsters, though, has not yet endorsed. They met with Donald Trump last month. Led to kind of mixed results. We heard some rank-and-file members were happy. We also heard that an executive board member called him a scab and an insurrectionist. So obviously this is a mixed effort. However, Donald Trump and his team believe it's something they can work towards.
Appreciate it, Kristen Holmes. Let's go to Kylie Atwood covering the Nikki Haley campaign from Salt Lake City, Utah, one of the Super Tuesday states that Haley's competing next week. Kylie, what are you hearing tonight from that campaign?
Yeah, we're hearing from the campaign for the first time since CNN has called the Michigan primary for former President Donald Trump. And they are saying that the results coming out of Michigan are a flashing warning sign for Trump come November. This is something that they have been saying repeatedly. The faction of the Republican Party that is not voting for Trump is a problem for him. I want to read to you part of the statement from the campaign spokesperson, Olivia Perez-Cuba, saying, quote, Joe Biden is losing about 20% of the Democratic vote today, and many say it's a sign of weakness in November. Donald Trump is losing about 35% of the vote. That's a flashing warning sign for Trump in November. So it should be noted that the campaign is pointing to the percentage vote that Trump isn't getting instead of the percentage vote that Nikki Haley is getting here. We're still waiting to see what the final results look like, but so far they're saying that 35% of the vote going away from Trump is a bad thing for him. They were saying just earlier this week that 40% of the vote not going for him was a bad thing. So they appear to be moving the goalposts when it comes to how they're measuring the success of their campaign in these early states. But this comes as Nikki Haley undeniably is heading into the most consequential week for her campaign to date. She has been saying that Super Tuesday is when more than 20 states will have voted, when all these Americans will have cast their ballot. We'll just have to watch and see what happens there. But they're saying that this is a problem for Trump as she has lost the Michigan primary.
Yeah, thanks so much. Back with the team here in New York. Let's talk about the pursuit by both campaigns of working class voters. Who do you think? Clearly, Donald Trump believes he can make inroads on with union voters. That even if the union is supporting Biden, he believes rank and file will go for him.
Well, I mean, we know that 2022 and 2023 big years for summers of solidarity, the winter of solidarity in terms of working class people. And really, you talking about sending a message. Working class people across this country are sending a strong message about the relief that they need. And I know that some of the data points in terms of how the economy is doing, in terms of people who are inside the bubble, the economy is doing well because it's doing well for people who have the greatest amount. But it's not really doing well. There's a disconnect between what's happening in the bubble and what's happening in the streets. And to the extent that both the former president and the current president are going to be fighting for those votes, and it's going to be the tale of two stories.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, I agree with that. And I think this president, I mean, we talked about messaging. We talk about, it seems like we just always harp on messaging. But there are a lot of successes that have come out of Washington. The question is, one, when will those legislative successes actually benefit people in their pockets? When will they feel it? That's one. And two, one of the things that it drives me crazy when we talk about working class voters, particularly in the media, we usually refer to white folk. And many people just overlook that there is a large swath of black and brown working class voters. Usually working class is code for who's working in a mill in Iowa or flyover country or Michigan or wherever it may be. But there are a lot in particular, and this is going to matter in places like Wayne County. This is going to matter in places like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is going to matter in Clark County, right, where you have these minority union workers who the president is trying to mobilize. He's going to win the overwhelming majority of working class union voters. The question is, will he get them in the margins that he needs?
Yeah, he got 75%. He won that by 75% last time. He's polling more in the 50% range right now. Same with Hispanic voters. He got, you know, 2/3 of that vote last time. That's more of an even split right now. And I agree with you that there's a working class issue. It's not just it's not a white non-college issue alone that he's going to have to address. But you say, you used an important word, feeling. He indisputably has an economic story to tell, but until people feel like the economy is better, and they are beginning to feel that, the question is by November, will that wash?
To your point, it's hard for me to say Bidenomics is working when people are still having trouble with the cost of grocery prices.
Right. Keep in mind, so Donald Trump won Michigan in 2016. He lost to Joe Biden in 2020. The height of the pandemic, the economy was in free fall. For these blue-collar voters that Donald Trump does know how to communicate with, and some of his border policies, some of his trade policies resonate with them, this is where he's looking back to make ground. Because despite objective successes of the Biden economy, there's still things like very high grocery prices, something that immediately hits you in the pocketbook, and it makes people feel like they're worse off than they're actually the macro stats may show. This is the area he is going to be targeting the most. It's talking about your life would be better under me than in this Biden economy.
Can I tell you the other thing that I also don't think gets enough attention in Michigan is they signed new voting laws into law last year in 2023 that significantly expanded early voting and mail-in voting, something that, as you well know, Republicans have struggled with because a lot of Republicans want to advocate for it. Trump has continued to undermine it, and it is something that really could significantly benefit Biden come November. And we see how close the margin has been at times, and that is something that, you know, Democrats control all levers of government in Michigan. They signed that into law. The voters there like it. That's something that Trump has refused to embrace, despite what his advisors want.
I think it's important for Republicans to lean into early voting. If there's a state that allows you to harvest ballots, if they've legalized it, even if you opposed legalizing in the first place, well, now it's the law. And that's what we saw in Nevada. A snowstorm hits Reno on Election Day, and then Adam Laxalt doesn't become the senator.
But doesn't the former president continue to rail against
I would say that the message that needs to get out to every one of his voters is how important it is to vote early. And it's not just about people who are considered high-propensity voters, people who will come out anyway on Election Day, but the lower propensity voters, to be able to get them out earlier makes your job easier when you're trying to turn out the vote over the course of the last 24, 48, 72 hours. We also saw it recently with the special election in New York 3, where a snowstorm ends up hitting in the middle of February, impacting the turnout.
You're completely right, but to Anderson's point, the president has basically continued, the former president has basically continued to rail against it, calls it corrupt, calls it crooked, said, when are you people going to understand? I mean, he's the biggest megaphone in his own world, and he's not.
And he's doing this in recent weeks. This isn't like something that happened in the last election. He's still doing this up until this day.
Yes. There are two names that we haven't talked about tonight, and I'm not a big believer in machines. I don't think, elected officials have quote-unquote machines or turnout machines. I think that is kind of a relic of the past, save for Gretchen Whitmer and Garland Gilchrist. Those two leaders of the Democratic Party in Michigan have done a really good job, and they actually have an ability to carry some water for the President of the United States over Donald Trump. And they've won re-election. They're exciting candidates, both of them. One has a future in statewide politics, and the other may be one day running for President of the United States.
Let's go back to Jake.
Thanks so much, Anderson. Joining us now is a key Michigan Democrat who has been, let's put it kindly, raising the alarm, sounding a warning, shooting a warning shot about the challenges President Biden faces in her home state of Michigan. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman, I remember you issuing such warnings in 2015, 2016. Not sure you were heated, but are Democrats in the White House and Washington, D.C. listening to you now?
I think I would answer it this way. In 2015 and 2016, nobody believed me, including most of the people in the media, until it happened. Michigan's a purple state. It's always a purple state. I'm not old, but I'm seasoned, and I've been through many elections. this is going to be a tough election year. This election could come down to the state of Michigan. I think it will. It's going to be a purple state until Election Day. And it's not just one demographic. You've been talking about a number of them that we've got to make sure get to the polls on Election Day.
So for the record, I believed you in 2015, 2016. Let's talk about what's going on in your state right now. Because, as you know, there is an organized group, many of them progressives, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, saying that in order to protest President Biden's support for Israel in the war that country is waging against Hamas in Gaza, which has left a horrific death toll in its wake, voters should, Democrats should vote uncommitted. Previously, we know that there are about 20,000 Democrats who vote uncommitted no matter what. Right now, the number is approaching 25,000, and what is it? You have with about 16% of the vote in. So it's going to be a sizable uncommitted vote. Is this a surprise to you in any way? And what do you make of this potential impact? Will the White House change course in any way?
So first of all, it's not a surprise to me. I've been telling people that. We have a campaign called Listen to Michigan with people that want to be listened to. But, you know, as everybody started acting surprised tonight or we're looking at figures, I said to multiple people over the course of the last month, my district, Washtenaw County, which has got Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, and everybody really ignores me when I say Ypsilanti too, I bet have more uncommitted votes than Dearborn. And as you're watching, I'm going to be right. And I expected it because it's not just the Arab American Muslim community. It's young people who are, want to be heard, are concerned, have the same concerns about, they know what Hamas did was a terrorist act, but they are watching innocent civilians be killed and the kind of damage that's there. We've got to talk about that issue, but we've got to talk about a lot of other issues too. Women's issues are going to be critical. The environment is going to be absolutely critical. The border is important to different parts of my district, like downriver. We have to talk about all those issues, and we've got to turn out voters in November. And the discussion about union workers was very accurate a few minutes ago as well.
So it's my impression that the reason that Listen to Michigan, this group that is urging the protest vote today, one of the things they're doing is they're saying, pay attention to us, President Biden. We're not costing you anything right now. Other than maybe some uncomfortable conversations. But Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton by roughly 10,000 votes in 2016. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by roughly 154,000 votes in 2020. If you don't listen to us, maybe we will vote third party. Do you think that President Biden is hearing that message? And if so, what will that mean? What will that mean in terms of foreign policy? What will it mean in terms of outreach? Because as you know, President Biden himself has not gone to talk to the Arab American and Muslim American community in Dearborn, although he has sent aides to do so.
So, look, I think that people want to be listened to and that this is not a monolithic community. No community is monolithic. There are some people that will vote for Donald Trump. I don't think it's a majority of this community. I think a lot of people may stay home, and a lot of people are going to know what the choice is, and that the choice is going to help them make their decision, that they don't want to see somebody who's called them poison or vermin or wants to ban them from this country elected either. But right now, people are hurting. I think that people are too raw. You've seen that people have been not even wanted to meet with the national security team or Samantha Powers. The president's working towards a temporary ceasefire. He says, I've called for a ceasefire. We've watched too many innocent people die there. Gaza is in terrible shape. But I think he does need to sit down with this community when feelings are not quite so raw. But he's also got to it's not just this community. This community is important in Michigan, but we've got to turn out our vote. Women's voices are going to be very important. Women were energized 2 years ago. We got to make sure they stay energized. This vote, who wins Michigan, is going to come down to who votes. And this is going to be about getting out the votes.
Last question. Your colleague, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, voted uncommitted in this primary. Her sister is, in fact, running the Listen to Michigan campaign, I believe. You have said that you told Congresswoman Tlaib that if Trump had been president when Hamas attacked Israel, then Trump just would have, quote, nuked Gaza. Has she told you how she's going to vote in November?
I haven't. Rashida and I talk all the time, and these are very private conversations, and I want to be. She's angry. She's got a grandmother that lives there. She has family that's really been hurt. You need to understand that in my district, these people have had family members, mothers and fathers and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And Rashida and I are doing casework every day of trying to get families who are desperate to get their family members out. And even when you get all the paperwork and the visas and a place for them to come, you cannot get them out of Gaza. So I understand where she is right now. We each have to make our own decision, but I understand how hurt and raw Rashida Tlaib is right now. And she represents a lot of people that she represents. We need to understand that. We've got to all put on and understand that, you know, I keep saying to everybody, a Jewish baby and a Palestinian baby are both babies. They're children. And I want all of our children to live in peace.
Amen to that. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, good to see you as always. Dana Bash, it is a rough night for Democrats trying to figure out how to make sure that what we're seeing in terms of this uncommitted vote doesn't vote third party or stay home or vote for Donald Trump in November.
You know, as you were talking to Congresswoman Dingell, I was thinking about what the Biden administration could do more of. I mean, obviously, we have seen a big shift in rhetoric and policy, as we've been talking about, certainly since right after October 7th. We have seen in the past few weeks Biden administration officials, as she mentioned, go up and try to talk to people in the community. We haven't seen the president himself. And he's good in the room. I mean, he knows how to talk to people. And he knows how to certainly express empathy for people's pain. And so my question is, how quickly after this, regardless of whether the numbers get much, much higher or not, is he going to go to Michigan and not make the mistake, frankly, that the Clinton campaign did, which is not taking Michigan as seriously? Very different issues.
David?
I also thought the other thing that Congresswoman Dingell said that we should keep our mind, she said women are going to be a huge factor here.
She said that a few times.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to remember, abortion rights was an enormous battle in Michigan. It was part of Governor Whitmer's huge reelection success, flipping the legislature to Democrats. We're not even talking about something like that in the context of this Democratic primary tonight with uncommitted. But I guarantee you that Governor Whitmer is going to make sure the issue of abortion rights is central to this Trump versus Biden campaign in this battleground.
Although she can't make it a referendum because she already did that. She already did that for her own reelection. That's a governor's prerogative. Lots of votes still to count tonight in Michigan. We're tracking them as they come in. Coming up, we're going to talk with a key member of the Biden-Harris reelection campaign as the Democratic protest vote for uncommitted picks up votes. We're back in a moment. Stay with us.